Most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you, and don't we live in very febrile times as the war, I think we should now be calling it, in the Middle East rages on for a 6th day. And the latest news on that is Kurdish troops from northern Iraq, from Erbil, from Kurdistan, have now entered Iran as part of a ground invasion. I understand that that is potentially being equipped and partially mobilised via the CIA. Azerbaijan's now dragged into everything, into turmoil as drones hit airports there. Meanwhile, Bahrain, the UAE and Cyprus very critical of the United Kingdom for failing to step up and protect UK air bases there, and indeed, for that matter, civilians. And why? Why have we been so slow to react? Why have we sat back twiddling our thumbs as the world has been engrossed in turmoil? Well, why is Ed military banned? That's right. That is his new nomenclature, because it is understood that he was the person in the cabinet who started pushing for a revolt against the Prime Minister, saying that UK air bases must not under any circumstances be used by the Americans to launch offences, or used at all. Well, at least flip-flop Starmer did do a bit of a U-turn and has reneged on that somewhat, but coming under heavy criticism for our allies, particularly in the Middle East, for failing to step up. So much to talk about today. If you want to join the conversation, the number is 03444 991 It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send a text. If you're going to do that, remember to write the word talk before you write your message. OK, let's kick off, shall we, with the brilliant Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked Online. Good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Alex. How you doing?
I am very well. First of all, I want to get your take on whether we are doing enough, whether we should have done more, whether Sir Keir Starmer was right to restrict our involvement down to minimal defence strategies, or whether you think we should have been shoulder to shoulder with the United States and Israel.
We should be shoulder to shoulder, especially with Israel. And, you know, the thing that we are not hearing from the left and from certain sections of the media is that this war was started by the Iranian regime on 7th of October, when their proxies went into Israel, an ally of ours, and killed more than 1,000 people, by the way, including 18 people with British citizenship, including a 13-year-old British girl, was killed by the proxies of the Islamic Republic on 7th of October, less than 3 years ago. The fact that our political class can't speak out against this regime, which murders British children, is actually sick-making. They can't take a firm moral stance to say that we are against this regime and we will support the people who it attacked 3 years ago. The Iranian theocrats brought this war upon themselves. The leftists on the streets who are presenting Iran as the innocent victim of an unprovoked war of aggression are simply lying. And I think we need a bit more truth in this discussion.
Why do you think that Starmer and the Labour cabinet have been so hesitant to get involved? Is this down to the fact that we've now been exposed as being woefully ill-equipped and underprepared? Is this down to concern about the Muslim voting bloc? Is this down to being sort of Marxist pacifists? My understanding, we spoke to a former Royal Naval officer yesterday who said that the Navy has been saying to the government, get our assets into the region. The minute that America was bringing all of its destroyers into the Middle East, we were supposed to be sending one over to Australia and submarines, and the Labour was saying that the Navy was saying to the Labour government, we've got to be there, we've got to be prepared, and apparently we just defied that suggestion. But I'm trying to understand why. What is the motivation?
They're moral cowards. That's what we're talking about here. That is how we should describe the Labour government. They're moral cowards. They hide their moral cowardice behind legalism. They say, well, we're not sure if this is legal or not, as if, you know, going to war is something you can just tick all the boxes on a legal form and then it will be fine. That's not how the real world works. They've got their heads up their behinds. They don't understand how war works. They're cowards. They just refuse to take a stand on anything. They refuse to take a stand for our allies. They refuse to take a stand for our values. They refuse to take a stand for the British people who were killed by the Iranian regime's proxies. They just refuse to take a stand on anything that's important. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about institutionalized cowardice. Now, I understand there is lots of discussion to be had about where this war goes next. No one wants to see another Iraq. No one wants to see a war go on for years and years and years and cause lots of death and destruction. I fully understand that. But what we're talking about right now is the latest stage in a war that has been raging for almost 3 years now between the Iranian regime and the Jewish nation. And that begs a question. Whose side is Britain on? Are we on the side of the only democratic country in that region, which is our ally? Or are we on the side of a bunch of Islamist barbarians who oppress their own people and terrorize the world? That's the question we need to ask ourselves.
Well, if you were an outsider looking in and have been watching the UK recently, you would assume that actually we were on the side of appeasing the death cult of militant Islamism. Look at the result in the Gorton and Denton by-election and quite how that was gained by sending out campaign materials in Urdu and talking about genocide by Israel. Now we're seeing protesters and candlelit vigils for the Ayatollah in Manchester, where, of course, we had attacks on synagogues and arrests of people trying to commit further acts of terrorism. I don't understand whether, if this government think they're trying to mollify Muslims, do they not realise that Iran is a militant Islamist country which is right now bombing Muslim countries?
Absolutely correct. And I think that's a large part of this. I think a large part of the moral cowardice of the government is that they don't want to upset British Muslim voters. That's the truth of the matter. And they think it would upset them if Britain was to contribute in any way to the war against the Islamic Republic. You know, the thing is, the hypocrisy of left-wing activists is almost unbelievable. You know, they said nothing, not one word, when the Iranian regime were massacring tens of thousands of people just last month. Just last month, the theocrats, the mullahs, were killing tens of thousands of ordinary Iranian men and women for the crime of wanting more freedom. The left was silent. In fact, they made excuses for it. They said these people should stay at home and stop causing trouble. Now they suddenly want us to believe that they care about Iranian life. Now they're suddenly on the streets because tragically some Iranian civilians are dying in this war that the Islamic Republic started. Now they are posturing as these great concerned people for ordinary Iranians. I'm not buying it. And I don't think anyone else is buying it either. We know that the only reason they're opposed to this war is because America is involved in it and Israel is involved in it. That's their opposition. They couldn't give a damn about life in Iran.
We're going to end up in a big mess, aren't we? I mean, I was reading the other day that the Strait of Hormuz is essentially not operating at all. 90% of the cargo that goes through that is just not able to pass right now. And this accounts for almost, I'd say, a quarter of the world's energy supplies. As a result, and because Iran is targeting various oil and gas fields, we're going to be thrown into an economic crisis and an energy crisis. And there you have Red Miliband, or military band, as I'm now going to call him, saying we mustn't get involved in this, telling Sir Keir Starmer, stay out, we want nothing to do with this, and having the audacity to turn around and say, oh, it could cause an energy crisis. I have a feeling, Brendan, that because we've had indulgent, naive and puerile politics for so long, we are not resilient, we're not self-sufficient, we are ill-prepared, and I have a feeling that if this goes on for more than 3 days, and Trump's now talking about maybe all the way up until September, I don't think Britain's going to fare this very well.
You know, the gall of Ed Miliband to accuse other people of causing an energy crisis. This is the man who is absolutely adamant that we shouldn't drill for oil in the North Sea or open any more coal-fired stations or develop nuclear in a meaningful way. He's made us dependent on other nations for our energy when we have a real abundance of energy in our own country. So he can't talk about an energy crisis in relation to anyone else. But you're right, the consequences of this conflict will be global. They will be pretty bad. That's why wars are generally agreed to be a bad thing. But even then, we need to be real about who started this war. We can't go around like a bunch of screaming children pointing a finger at evil America or evil Israel. That is infantile posturing. We need to get real about how this war started, when it started, and who is responsible for it. The people responsible for it are the mullahs who are currently under attack by America and Israel. That's the truth. But you're right. Do we have the resilience to ride this out? I'm not convinced we do. We don't even have the moral gumption to say we are opposed to the Islamic Republic. Whether we can ride out the consequences of this conflict is up for question too. We need to get our act together because the world is not a happy, clappy place. And we need to know where we stand in relation to all of that.
Well, it's basically caught Starmer with his pants down, looking completely ineffective, unable to make a decision, no moral conviction. What do you think we should be doing as a country? I was listening to Kemi Badenoch this morning, and quite frankly, I didn't think she sounded like she had a clue what we should be doing, dithering and just sort of saying, oh, well, we should have been there alongside America. But she couldn't really put words to the effect of in what capacity, whether we would be committing ground troops, whether we would be doing offensive strikes. She didn't seem to have any sort of strategy either, which is deeply concerning. But how do you think we should be plugging into this?
Well, you know, I don't know that we're needed at that level yet, because I do think it seems like America and Israel have got this under control at the moment. Things can spin out of control very easily in conflict situations. This is incredibly unpredictable, but it seems to me that these are pretty forensic strikes against the regime, which is taking out a lot of very powerful people. And that's kind of what you want in a conflict like this. You don't want 20-year-long boots on the ground conflict that goes on and on and on. So let's see how it develops. But what Britain absolutely should be doing is assisting our allies. When they ask for help in an existential war between a friend of ours, Israel, and an enemy of ours, the Iranian regime, Britain should step up and offer the assistance that it can militarily, but more importantly, morally. This is the thing that worries me most, just the absolute self-loathing of our ruling class, who can't even bring themselves to say that the Islamic Republic is an enemy of our civilization and it deserves to be destroyed for the benefit of the people of Iran, the benefit of the people of Israel, and the benefit of the world more broadly. They can't even say that. And this is the institutionalized cowardice I'm talking about. Both morally and militarily, we we've been caught, as you say, with our pants down. We have become a second-rate power, and that's a real tragedy.
Yeah, it's quite amazing when France is sending a load of assets into the region. There's a whole list, 45 Rafale fighter jets, various destroyers, helicopters, you name it. France is chucking it all in there to the applause of much of the global community. And we're sending a destroyer that's not even left yet and a couple of helicopters. It's pathetic. Now, I know that you are a fairly sort of liberal in your attitudes when it comes to free speech, but what do you make of the idea of there being a pro-Iranian regime march? Do you think, as the Tories are saying, the Met Police should ban that from happening?
I'm not convinced it should be banned, but let me just caveat that with saying that this is a really disgusting march. As people will know, it's the Al-Quds March. It's part of the international celebrations of the Islamic Revolution that took place in Iran in 1979. It's been taking place in London every year for the past few years. People on this march have waved the Hezbollah flag, they've waved the Hamas flag, they've chanted for the destruction of Israel. This is a poisonous march full of regressive, crazy people, and we should be absolutely free to say that. My only issue is that banning it might set a dangerous precedent, but I don't want it to seem like I'm soft on this, because I think the thing we need to do at the moment is have much more unfettered freedom of speech to call out the problem of radical Islam in our country. And for too long, we've said it's Islamophobic to talk about these problems. And in fact, Starmer is currently trying to bring in a new definition of Islamophobia. That's all got to go. We need full, frank freedom to say, listen, we've got a real problem with Islamic extremists in Britain, and we need to confront it, face it down, and get back to normality.
Why on earth are we one of the only countries now that has not prescribed the IRGC and the Muslim Brotherhood, which we know are horrific terrorist organisations? Let's say if we'd done that and this march takes place, we could potentially start picking people out of it and prosecuting them.
Well, that's exactly right, because the fact we haven't prescribed those organizations, especially the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, but as you say, the Muslim Brotherhood too, which is at the center of so much mayhem around the world, the fact we haven't prescribed them is lunacy. It's complete madness. And again, the only way I can explain it is as an attempt to avoid offending Muslims in the UK or to avoid seeming Islamophobic. I think that whole idea of Islamophobia has got us in a real bind, because it means we're scared of having certain discussions and taking certain action in case we get called phobic. I mean, that's why the rape gang scandal went on for so many decades, because officials and police forces were scared of being called Islamophobic if they spoke the truth about these gangs. The fact of the matter is that our fear of offending Islam has caused untold mayhem in our country. It allowed those gangs to run riot. It means we turned a blind eye to the growth of Islamist extremism. It now means we're refusing to prescribe obviously terrorist organizations. We've really tied ourselves in knots over this question. And that's why I say one of the key things we need right now is much more freedom to be honest about the problems in our society.
Brendan, I couldn't agree more. Always brilliant catching up with you, the brilliant Brendan O'Neill, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I've got a bit of a joke for you this morning. Knock, knock. Who's there? Well, not Sir Keir Starmer, because he is the joke, isn't he? Once again, he's caught with his hands down. Once again, he's not addressing the nation. He hasn't prescribed Islamist organisations. He is not sending any sort of backup to our troops over in Akrotiri. He's the laughing stock of the world. You've got Cyprus criticising him, Bahrain criticising him, Donald Trump criticising him, the UAE criticising him. And where is he? Where's Ed Miliband? I haven't seen that guy for a while. Clearly they've locked him in a cupboard because he's too much of an embarrassment. But it turns out he was the one behind telling the Prime Minister not to allow the US to use basically their own air bases. Their own air bases. Yes, they might be either on our territory or shared by us, but they are US air bases that are critical at a time of war. I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so blimmin' tragic. So Keir Starmer is a joke. Right, your thoughts please. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. 82722 if you'd like to send a text message. Write the word talk before you text. You can also leave me a WhatsApp on 0344 499 1000 as well. It's all your normal network rate, etc. So it doesn't cost you a bob more than anything else. And I'm looking forward to catching up with some of you just after this.
Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, what you gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's really embarrassing to be British right now, isn't it? And I've never felt that way before. I've always thought you could, puff out your chest and hold your head high on the international stage. But this, I mean, look, we are being dragged into a war, whether we like it or not. There's a massive war going on. Our stuff's being bombed. We've got expats living over there. Our allies are, eyeball deep in trying to get rid of mad Islamist terrorists. You've got bombs and drones and missiles landing all over the place, dragging more and more countries into the fray. And our parliament, what are they doing? Well, they're doing that, aren't they? Looking like they're all auditioning for Britain's Got Talent or something. Some kind of cha-cha-cha in aid of, here it is, an event to promote the advantages of dance for the nation's health and well-being. Oh, great. That's going to help win the war, isn't it? Fantastic. Look at them all. I'm so proud of our brilliant veteran politicians and statesmen that they can do the two-step. Well, how about you tango your way down to the Royal Navy headquarters and get that blimmin' destroyer out of Portsmouth and over to Cyprus? That would be far more effective than this nonsense. It's so embarrassing. And why is it that Starmer, every time there's a crisis, I remember this after the Southport attacks, days went by before he did anything, before he addressed the nation. Oh, he turned out with a bunch of flowers, didn't he? At some sort of memorial, and everyone thought that was disgusting, but he said nothing for days, just left us there dangling, thinking, where are we? What are we supposed to think? Where's the direction? Where's the leadership? And again, he's gone AWOL. Like I said, no one's seen that Ed Miliband, the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Oh, you'd think she might get behind a lectern and say something. What are these people? Did they think doing the job was just sitting there having a couple of photos taken, sitting around at a desk with those little green lamps that they love in the Houses of Parliament? You're supposed to be active. You're supposed to actually run a country. Honestly, it's just well, that's what they're doing instead, isn't it? Fantastic. Oh, let's hit up the phone line, shall we, and speak to David in Coventry, where it seems Ed Miliband has also been sent. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Alex. I love listening to you. I have to disagree with you, though. You said earlier on, a few minutes ago, that Starmer is a joke. You actually didn't go anywhere near far enough. Yes, he is a joke, but he's also a traitor. I use that word advisedly, but if you look at everything he's done and everything he does, it's designed to damage Great Britain.
You would think. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Sabotaging our energy supplies, cozying up to our enemies in China, preventing our allies from using military bases. It's almost like the man has been installed by Beijing or Russia or the Ayatollah to be their proxy.
Well, it's look at the Chinese embassy. Just that on its own. Permission for the Chinese embassy. But then the problem goes back 20 years. The previous government were just as bad. They had 14 years to sort things out, and they failed miserably. And so anyway, Starmer is a traitor, and I really genuinely believe that we need to change the law in this country, and that people like him with decisions like our leaders are making should be investigated for the amount of damage that they do to the country. Miliband very clearly despises Great Britain.
I'm kind of with you on that one. It's just, like I said, it's a joke, but it's not a funny one, is it? And it is a lot worse than that. David, I couldn't agree more. I think it is an excellent point and well made. Let's see what John in Newcastle has to say. How are you doing, John?
Hello. Okay, thank you. I can only agree with the chap that's just been on. I believe I've thought of it as a traitor too, Stormer. The reality is, over the decades passed by, and I've never known such a farce in the years gone by with the Tory party making it for 14 years. Before that, Labour was in power. They left a note saying there's nothing left in the bank. So we're going to have to revert back to Labour because that's all there was. But I want to tell the people of this country, as far as I'm concerned, which I am ashamed of this country. I'm ashamed of what we've got. We've got a Royal Navy there. There's only half a dozen craft. And some of it's not fit enough to be out on the water. And it's going to take 2 weeks for this boat to get across there. And no, the whole structure of this country is disgraceful. I'm ashamed and disappointed at the fact that I have to buy a passport to go abroad and then come back. But thousands of people have been allowed to come across the water without any passport or any identification of what they've been in the past, and now we know what some of them have been: murderers, rapists, etc., etc. And we've got a government here which is just as bad as the last government, if not even going to be worse.
They're worse. And also, a lot of those people trafficking routes have lined the pockets of terrorist organisations. It's been used as an act of grey zone warfare to destabilise and divide the country by flooding us with migrants from Muslim countries. And potentially, a significant number of these people will be signed-up members of the IRGC or the Taliban or ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And we've just waved them on in, given them hotels, mobile phones, rolled out the red carpet, beatified them as if they're like, I don't know, the second coming of Christ. It's ridiculous. Every single thing that this government, and quite frankly, the government before did, was the opposite of preparing us as a nation for a crisis. It has made us so vulnerable, so exposed, and we can see right now, can't we, that we are not up to the job. I mean, if this, and I think this will spread, I think that this war's going to drag on. I think that Iran, the regime in Iran's not going to pack up its toolkit and go, oh, well, that's that. Bye, guys. They're theocratic. This is eschatological for them. These are end times. They want to create a world war. If they're going down, they want the entire planet to go down with them because they need to be in the loony bin, quite frankly. But if they start losing militarily, if they start weakening significantly, that they cannot hold fort in Iran, they will no doubt trigger a wave of devastating terror attacks in their sleeper cells around the world, because they are a death cult. Are we ready for that? Well, Lord knows who we've got in this country, so good luck, Great Britain. Thank you ever so much for your call. John in Newcastle, if you want to get involved with the conversation, 03444 99 1000 is the number. You can give our Kieran a bell. He'll take down your name, your number, and we will give you a call back when we're ready to stick you on air. It's your normal network rate, 8722. If you'd rather send a text message, and the long number as well can be used for WhatsApping. So do send me your thoughts on there in the form of a message or indeed a voice note. OK, we're taking a short break now, but after that we're joined by Rear Admiral Chris Parry, ex-NATO commander, former Royal Navy commander. Let's get his take on what on earth is going on with our warships. That's after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Now, the United Kingdom used to be king of the waves, basically. Rule Britannia. Britannia rules the waves. We were one of the greatest naval countries in the world. In fact, it was through our naval superiority that at one point we basically owned and ran a third of the world. Well, now look at us. 6 warships, 3 of them can't even get going because they're under long-term repair. The one that's supposed to be sent can't go yet for reasons that are way beyond my comprehension. Everyone else is having to send their military assets, their naval assets, into the theatre in the Middle East to defend our airbase. What is going on? Let's speak to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, ex-NATO commander, former Royal Navy commander. I mean, Chris, we knew we were under-resourced. We had not been investing in defence. We knew that no government really has taken seriously the need to be prepared for war, despite seeing how geopolitically febrile the world is. And we've really been exposed now. How bad is it?
Well, it's really bad, Alex. The fact that we have 6 air defence destroyers and we can't actually get one to Cyprus within sailing time is absolutely ludicrous. You know, I mean, I left the Royal Navy in 2008 and we had more air defence destroyers then than we have now. There's no question about that. Things are much more capable if they're properly manned, if they're properly equipped and they're in the right place at the right time. But I'm afraid to say that we've had a succession of senior officers and also politicians who think the next election is more important than defending this country.
My understanding is the Navy had essentially said to the government, for crying out loud, we've got to get into the region. I mean, things are beginning to hot up when America was sending its warships towards Iran. And that this government, for reasons that I can't comprehend, decided to ignore them. Is that normal practice? Is it, you know, do a lot of governments just sort of pick and choose when the security services or the Navy says, this is our advice to you, you know, this is our strategic advice because we're the professionals and we know how these things play out? Do governments normally go, OK, got it, right, going to act on it? Or is it typical that a government goes, well, thanks for that, OK, we'll consider it, bye?
Yep, the latter, I'm afraid. Every politician I've dealt with, except a couple under the last Labour government, in fact, whenever you say anything to them at senior level, they all think they know your business better than you do. And everybody flatters themselves that they know about military stuff. I mean, when I was in the Ministry of Defence, as soon as somebody from the city rang up and said something about international finance or economics, you'd see politicians jumping at it. But when people who've trained all their lives to give advice about military operations say something, I'm afraid they generally either ignore it or they say some domestic political issue is more important. The fact of life is we're in a really parlous state right now. Our defences have been neglected. And I think the last time the Royal Navy had something as humiliating as this is when the Dutch sailed up the Medway and stole one of our warships called the Royal Charles. That was in 1667. And I'm afraid to say this doesn't do our national image or indeed our professional image any good at all. But let me stress, Alex, these Type 45s are in such a bad state because of political decisions made by the last Labour government. I was there when decisions were made about what equipment was put into these ships, the fact that all the money went on the air defence system and nothing else really was given proper weight and attention, and they were put into service. I should also add that we were originally going to have 12 of them. It was cut down to 6. But even if we had 12 of them today, I doubt whether any of them will be ready for action because of the manifest problems that actually exist on the ships themselves. I mean, underwater, you know, they're supposed to be quite silent in relation to detection by submarines. They sound like a box of spanners because it was neglected in terms of noise hardening, as we call it, and acoustic hygiene.
Now, when we do finally set sail and go and join the party, how vulnerable are we going to be? Because we're on the back foot then. People can track our movements. They know what we're up to. They can watch us real time, taking however long it's going to take to get to Cyprus. And looking at what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz right now, and America saying, well, look, we're going to have to go in there and escort oil tankers through that strait. There are some people saying, well, perhaps he's walking into a trap because the Iranian regime is estimated to have 17 submarines garrisoned at its headquarters, which is just at the north of the Strait of Hormuz. Is there a possibility when we finally trundle into action that we are basically a sort of floating duck, a moving target?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the American Navy's got anti-submarine assets that can deal with that. They've already had their major submarines destroyed already. These are mini-subs. They're not normal submarines you and I would think are capable of things. I mean, you know, I'm the only person since 1945 to have actually disabled a submarine. So I can talk with some authority on this. The fact of life is the Iranians have a very low capability. The real threat I would worry about in the Straits of Hormuz is mines, not submarines, oddly enough. I think they can deal with the submarines. But if you mine those areas, it's going to be quite difficult because you're going to have to get rid of those mines. We've got new technology. When I say we, the Americans have got new technology for that in the form of underwater drones. You know, the Americans, if they put their mind to it, have got the force capabilities to deal with the Iranians. They've already sunk most of the Iranian Navy anyway. So I think the rest of the Iranian Navy is going to be very reluctant to go to sea. I think it'll be the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps vessels that will be out there. They're obviously got slightly more motivation. They think they're on their way to heaven. So they'll be in the front line, I suspect, just like kamikazes were in World War II.
Now, from a military perspective, and no one's got a crystal ball, but how do you see this playing out? Because Donald Trump has been saying, well, this could go on until September if need be. We're in it for the long term. We're going to get to the other side. But I was, reading that if the Strait of Hormuz is closed for more than a week, it actually precipitates an energy crisis worse than the Arabian Gulf, the Arabian oil embargo of 1973, which basically plunged us into blackouts and 3-day working weeks or whatnot.
I was there.
Yeah, so how is this going to play? If they did start chucking mines in the Strait of Hormuz, this is going to be a nightmare. Or do you think that Iran is now in a position where it is going to be so weak and, every few minutes there's a headline coming up, a jet's taken out, a warship's been sunk. They don't seem to be winning this, but do you think it does have the potential to drag on? Because if it did, the economic and energy crisis that's going to flow from that is going to be catastrophic.
Well, I think all things are on the table at the moment, Alex. I mean, Iran could collapse like Syria did in the space of a couple of days. You could actually get a situation where the Iranian army turns on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and it's all over. At the other end, yeah, they could hold out. I think they are holding back some of their better missiles for later on. But we shouldn't underestimate the weight of attack that Iran is under. I think they're almost paralyzed in terms of operating. I mean, I'll give you an indication of it. The missile and drone operations are now being conducted at unit level. There's no direction at all from the government. That actually makes it a bit more dangerous because it's more unpredictable and sporadic. But I think the Americans wouldn't have embarked on this without doing a thorough risk analysis. What I don't know about, and none of us know about, is what political objectives the US government and the Israeli government have actually got in mind here. The one thing I would always ask as a military commander is, what is your political objective here, not your military objective? I can deal with that for you, but what is the political objective? I don't see how this ends.
Yeah, well, you see, I think it's quite clear that they want the regime to collapse. Trump has said it explicitly. Iranians, this is your moment. Take the opportunity. We're going to help you. They've now mobilised Kurdish forces from Iraq to go in as a first wave of some form of ground invasion. And all we're hearing is this sort of weak excuse of, well, we don't know what the plan is. And, like you just said, given that Iran has been an adversary of the West for half a century now, given that, this is how to take down the regime has been going on not even since 2023 in October the 7th, but since Trump 1.0 when he took out the previous head of the IRGC, I would imagine that there is quite a deep and comprehensive strategy. Am I being too optimistic?
No, I think I mean, if you look at what CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command, are saying, they're very clear about their military objectives. That's the point, Alex. I think what's really interesting about the Trump administration is they've said to the military, just get on with your job. They've let them off the leash and said, I mean, the fact that an Iranian warship has been torpedoed off the coast of Sri Lanka is quite extraordinary. I mean, I was shocked when I heard about it, that actually they would take out something that far from the combat zone. But, as Jackie Fisher said, moderation in war is imbecility. You have to get on with it, do it as quickly as possible, as lethally as possible, so the other side, its will gets to break. And I think that's what the Americans are trying to do right now, is break the will of the regime such that it says, look, what are your terms? And I suspect that's going on as well through either the Omanis, another intermediary right now. There's no doubt. I mean, the Americans will have gamed this, and I mean gamed literally, because that's how quite a lot of this stuff is done now. Artificial intelligence will be being employed in every aspect of American and Israeli operations right now to make sure they've got the maximum effort going onto every single target and every single thing they're trying to achieve.
Finally, do you think that there are greater global reverberations beyond economic and energy crises, which is if all of the sort of world's kinetic and military energy is being sucked centrifugally into the Middle East, does this not now expose Taiwan, that China might go, that's something we can take now because it can't be defended? Does it actually help Russia, although, of course, they were receiving plentiful amounts of Iranian drones, but does it help them go the eyes off Ukraine?
Well, Alex, if I were Chinese military planner right now, I'd be looking at the American capability right now and saying, am I ready to take that on yet? I'm not sure I am, to tell you the truth. And the Americans, will have gamed what's going on in the Asia Pacific. One of the things that's disappointed me about our own government's response here is the Americans are clearly trying to do the right thing here. And if they get it right, they'll detach Iran from Russia and China, this alliance that they've got. And if you think about it, with Venezuela and Iran in the bag, they're dominating the bulk of the world's oil supply and gas as well. So that's going to affect China and Iran quite significantly in geopolitical terms. But what disappoints me is that the rest of the free world has not said to the Americans, while you're engaged in the greater Middle East, we'll take on some of the other tasks for you. Yeah. We'll actually put presence out there in the Asia Pacific. We'll actually do security tasks. Because during the Falklands, our allies, the New Zealanders, the Australians, did that for us. And I think, one of the big things we need to do in the future is a thing called a 1,000-ship navy. A chap called, we had a sort of ex-chief of the American armed forces said, look, we've got nearly 1,000 warships in the free world, and we should use them together to pursue what the free world is doing. It's not just America. So with China and Russia building up their forces at sea in particular, we should actually exploit the opportunity we've got for using the free world navies to actually patrol what is effectively what I call the physical equivalent of the World Wide Web, the sea.
What is so staggering is the condemnation for Trump's assertiveness has actually come from the West. It's not the Muslim states go, well, that's an illegal war, you shouldn't have gone into Iran. They're saying, please, please, come, help, we don't like them either. And it's actually all of America's allies going, you shouldn't be doing that. It's a craziness. Finally, before I let you go, Chris, what do you make of this? Does this fill you with joy and pride to see our MPs dancing their way to good health as the Middle East is on fire?
Well, Alex, I think probably what disappoints me, I'm afraid, is the sort of tin air that our MPs seem to have while the world is burning. And, we've actually got a cost of living crisis, and they think this is good for morale. I think what I've seen on social media just encourages contempt, I'm afraid, for this sort of thing. We want to hear strong leadership. We want to hear things that boost morale in our daily lives right now. Frankly, this is something from the past.
Chris, it's always great to have you on. Thank you for your wisdom and your expertise, and well done for being the only man to have taken out a submarine. I love that little factoid. What a badge of honour that is. OK, right, if you want to join the conversation, let me remind you once again, the number is 0344499 1000 for WhatsApp. or to register your interest in having a phone conversation, 87222. If you'd like to send a text, write talk before you message. We're taking a short break. I'm also going to take a little short break from war for just a brief moment to talk about war inside the workplace. Latest workplace guidance. It's the most ridiculous woke stuff I've ever heard. In fact, I'm just going to leave it at that. You can hear it after this break.
The Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, what your gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Now, I'll tell you one thing, right? When you're in the world of broadcasting, people have some pretty sharp elbows. That's right, it's a competitive industry. It's the sort of place where everyone wants to take your job, and if you go on holiday too long, guess what? That seat don't remain cold, another bum is on it. Well, it turns out that describing workplaces as competitive, as I just did, is too masculine. Oh, that's not nice. It's too boyish to say competitive. This isn't just some whack job weirdo think tank, some crazy charity, some short fringe blue-haired zealot with a Socialist Workers' Party placard. No, this is government issuing you workplace guidance, urging employers to remove words such as competitive and ambitious from job adverts. This, of course, has come from Queen of Woke herself, the Minister for Women and Equalities, Bridget Phillips, who unveiled these recommendations from the Office for Equality and Opportunity on Wednesday. It advises businesses to avoid terms linked to male stereotypes. What are you talking about, women can't be competitive? That is sexist. What she's saying is sexist. Instead, they've got to use gender-neutral job titles. According to evidence behind the recommendations, words such as dominant and independent are stereotypically masculine. Do you know what? I'll tell you someone who's not stereotypically masculine. Ed Miliband. I've never seen a girly brain worse than his, quite frankly. But this to me is sexist, suggesting that women cannot be competitive, that women cannot be ambitious, and, you know, heaven forfend that someone in their profession might be ambitious. No, get back under that slanket and claim some more benefits. That's what Phillips wants, isn't it? Let's speak now to Dr. Philip Kisserly, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. We're at war, right? And this is what they're doing. They're saying, don't... No wonder we can't be sending destroyers anywhere or fighter jets or actually standing up against the bad guys on the world stage because, I don't know, being ambitious or competitive or dominant or independent is, I don't know, some sort of patriarchal evil. What is... Why? Why is this happening?
Oh, Alex, it's great to see you. And why? Alas, I cannot answer that question because it is bonkers. It is crazy. I mean, I was just looking at this masculine word. So independent is a masculine word. Ambitious is a masculine word. The women in my life have basically two characteristics. They are independent and they are massively ambitious, okay? And it is frankly, it is an insult that they should be worried or concerned or affected by this kind of language. That's exactly what they are. So just get rid of all that drivel, get rid of all that gender drivel away for a moment. And what this is doing is outlawing these concepts, these modes of behaviors, isn't it? So it's outlawing independence, ambition, and competitiveness. And when you get rid of those things, the vacuum is filled up by the opposite. And what we are talking about here is socialism. Time immemorial. This is what happens. Socialism, identity politics, and this is going to impact massively on business. And this is about big business, isn't it, Alex? 200 to 250 employees, this kind of thing. So this is about money. This is about competitiveness. This is about our economy. This is about being afloat. You know, it's insane. But I don't expect anything different from this car crash of a government.
I mean, talking about money, how much does it cost to start drawing up ridiculous reports like that? And what are companies supposed to now put in their job adverts? Oh, we'd like a really dependent, unambitious, lazy eunuch to just sit around and sing Kumbaya and make cups of tea for everybody, who has no ambition, doesn't want any career progression, frankly, can't be bothered turning up to work. That's the candidate we're after.
And what happens with that as well is, as I said before, a different culture takes place and the core purpose of businesses and organizations takes a back seat. In actual fact, it vanishes. And what happens is people start fixating on things like diversity, inclusion, race, fragility, all of those things. And that becomes, celebrated. And it's kind of a cuckoo in the nest, Alex. And all you have to do is look to the public sector to see the devastation that this stuff causes. But now, of course, Labour, this ridiculous Labour government is trying to impose it on all business. And frankly, it's really terrifying. I think that, it's like everything else, isn't it? Everything is grinding to a halt. Everything's becoming inverted. Everything's becoming the opposite of what it should be. And I want business to be competitive. Right. I want it to be ambitious, and it isn't real. It isn't the real world, as you were just saying, the world that we both live in. If you don't deliver, if you're not good, if you're not ambitious, if you don't have vision, if you don't have the freedom to express yourself, then you're toast, and a good thing too, I think.
I've got a friend who sort of says that something that's happened societally is we've let too much of what he says the feminisation of the brain. And he doesn't mean this in a sort of sexist way, because he thinks men and women have all different assets to their personality, but sort of describes what, say, Gad Saad, the great professor, would call suicidal empathy. That's, oh, poor thing, oh, we must be nice, the Be Kind movement. That this feminisation of the workplace has happened through, things such as HR and PR. And that actually it weakens a society from the inside out. And yet what's so strange is when you look at the socialist movement of old, their great hero was Stakhanov. The Stakhanovites in Russia, they put big statues of these men and their tools, hammer and sickle. It was actually about masculinity. And we're the nation of Margaret Thatcher, Elizabeth I, Boudicca. And now we've just got these absolute wet weekends, these drips, these nobodies, these pathetic, gruelling toddlers in our cabinet. cabinet. I mean, what do we need to do to shake things up, Philip?
Well, it's so deep, isn't it? And we've had conversations about this before, but it isn't just about politics. It's the layer underlying the politics. It's the blob. This is a classic manifestation, an expression of blobbiness, I would say. Okay, this is what it's all about. So I think we need to completely get rid of all of this stuff. It's about identity politics. It's about the managerial class. It's about equity. Those are the key things that are really holding us back. And this is, as I say, this is about equity. That's not equality of opportunity. This is equality of outcome, isn't it? All you're looking for, the height of your ambition, sorry, I'm not allowed to say that word, is that you want someone who is reliable. Right? In other words, Alex, you want someone with a pulse and a heartbeat and who can turn up roughly round about 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. That's it. So all of this stuff needs to go. We need competitiveness. We need the opposite of what we've got. Now, that isn't just about politics, as I say. That is about changing a culture, a deep culture of victimhood. This is about celebrating success. This is actually about being aggressive. In the correct context, there's nothing wrong with being aggressive. Being aggressive is a good thing. Obviously not if it's detrimental and it's destructive. But if you want to get things done, actually, if you want to make the day work for you, you have to go out and grab it. And that's what we're not doing as a country. We're not going out and grabbing things. We're not saying this is who we are. We are proud. It's about pride as well. We are proud of who and what we are and our heritage and culture.
Is there not a danger here as well? We haven't got long, Philip, but, you know, in many respects, what successive governments have done, society has ostracised and demonised, excluded, pushed out young men and the idea of manhood. And now what I seem to be seeing is a lot of these young men who are rightfully indignant, and they have every reason, it's justified that they're angry, are being sort of pushed to the fringes, and that itself creates a danger.
It does. So if you have ostracized young men who feel there is nothing in the system for them, they are not part of the system, they are outside of the system, then they'll start fighting against it and creating their own ecosystem. We desperately don't want that. We want talent, because a lot of those young kids are incredibly talented, are incredibly bright. There's another thing here, Alex, and I'll just finish with this. It's about taxpayers, people with money, people who do things as well, people who make things happen. They're leaving the country.
Right, we're losing our best and replacing them with the world's worst. I couldn't agree more. Philip, it's always great talking to you, a man of great common sense. We're taking a short break. Put the kettle on and I'll have a cup of tea as well, and see you very soon.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. We live in turbulent times, do we not? And never before have I felt so distrusting and disgusted by the United Kingdom's government, or should I say lack thereof, because it seems to me that we are essentially doing nothing. Are we doing nothing because we're best mates with our nominal enemies? Are we doing nothing because we're weak? Are we doing nothing because we can't do anything, because we're ill-equipped and unprepared? I'm going to read this amazing message, my favourite message that's come in so far, from Margaret in Norfolk. Nelson has put his eye patch over his good eye. He can't bear to look down Whitehall. The French are defending Cyprus for us. That's brilliant. Well said, Margaret. Well, there's just been a brilliant tweet, can I just say, by Sir Liam Fox, who is saying that Sir Keir Starmer's fence-sitting, lawyer dependency and utter failure of leadership on Iran makes Britain irrelevant and invisible on the international stage, and the only plus is the virtually certain US veto on the sellout of the Chagos Islands. Questions need to be answered by the government, especially Attorney General Lord Hermer. I've been saying that for a long time, well over a year now. I'm like, who is this man? How much influence does he have? What are his connections? What about his appointment? Not even elected, just hand-picked, all coming from the same curious, let's say, human rights chambers, where they seem to have in some respects, pro bono as well, taken on cases against the UK government, gone after our armed forces, represented terrorists. I think big questions need to be asked. Well, I'm delighted to say Sir Liam Fox, the former Conservative Defence Secretary, joins us now. Where to be? There is so much to talk about, Liam. I don't even know what to reach for. The fact that you've got Labour MPs married to Chinese spies, the fact that our military seems to be unable to do anything, the fact that Sir Keir Starmer seems to be on the side of the bad guys, not the good side. Good guys, we're an international laughing stock. What has happened? What has gone on here?
Well, we have a government that doesn't seem to believe that the first duty of government is the protection of the UK, its citizens and its interests. It seems to believe that when there's a crisis, don't even try to determine any element of leadership, reach for the lawyers. I was in Washington last week, and there's real alarm amongst the very pro-British elements in Washington, who are considerable, who are wringing their hands about the direction of travel of the UK. They see us as having been giving leadership through the Cold War. They saw what we did in the Falklands. They saw that Britain would be very, very quick to defend its interests. And they say, where are you? What's become of you? And there's real concern about where Britain stands on some of the key issues of the day.
When it comes to situations as dismal as they are here, the first question that's sort of asked is this cock-up or conspiracy? Do you think it's the latter? Because I was saying to a good friend of mine, Niall Gardner, at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., if I was sitting in American Congress right now, I would be subpoenaing all of the legal documents surrounding the Chagos Island deals. I would be demanding that Hermer and Sands are accountable, that they give over all the information of how they got to this conclusion, who was paid what and who was involved.
Well, I completely agree with that. And I think there are three key issues here. The first is, did Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, know that as part of the treaty with the United States over Diego Garcia, the Diego Garcia base in the Chagos Islands, that the first clause demanded that it remained under British sovereignty? Well, if he didn't know that, then that's incompetent and he shouldn't be there. Secondly, if he did know that, did he get specific approval of the United States that we could begin discussions about sovereignty and the legal process to transfer sovereignty to Mauritius? If he didn't get that specific assurance, there are real questions to be asked about whether Parliament was treated appropriately. And thirdly, as you alluded to there, who did the Attorney General talk to, or which bits of the UK government spoke to the United States? Which bits of the US government were they? What agreement did they get and when? Because this has big implications for American politics too, whether there were elements within the United States political system who are happy to see parts of America's national security traded away in order to please unknown forces in the UN or elsewhere. The first duty of the British government is the protection of the United Kingdom, not to please semi-legal arguments.
See, the way I look at this is I kind of feel in politics there's no such thing as a coincidence. And isn't it strange that the guy who I believe, and I don't want to dig myself a legal hole here and get in trouble with a barrister with far more money and influence than I have, but Phillips, I understand, took Mauritian citizenship. I also understand that the money that we're set to pay Mauritius is going to enable them to become a tax haven. I also understand that he received at least part of an £8 million pot to write this deal. We now see Mauritius calling for a ceasefire and not wanting Diego Garcia to be used at all. This government is obsessed with bimbling over to China every 5 seconds, and there seems to be the long arm of Beijing in all of this. And it just so happens that Phillips, Richard Hermer and Keir Starmer are big old buddies going way back. I think something smells very, very funny here. I don't know whether you agree with me.
Well, I think that the problem is that, and I wouldn't go down the rabbit hole of what individuals have done, but I think what clear British policy is not to put UK national security at the top of the agenda. Giving sovereignty away to Mauritius, which is a close ally of China in the region, it does not make any sense, but it does follow a pattern of behaviour. This is a government that is withdrawing Britain from the international stage, which, if you go to the Gulf, for example, which I visit frequently, worries about the level of infiltration of groups like the Muslim Brotherhood into our universities. So countries like the UAE are no longer sending UAE students to British universities. They see the UK pulling back in terms of what's happening in the Gulf. They've seen what's happened in the Chagos, and they wonder whether this is a British government, unlike anything we've seen since World War II, that simply does not want to accept Britain's responsibilities for leadership in the world. And that's exactly how it looks to me. And I think it puts the United Kingdom and our allies in peril. It's not as if Iran has actually been a passive partner in relation to the United Kingdom's interests. Their proxies, the Houthis, have been lobbing missiles at the Royal Navy in the Red Sea. They have been attacking our allies across the region. They have been backing terrorist organizations, including the repression of their own people. And we still didn't want to prescribe the IRGC. We seem to have a curious blind spot when it comes to a number of places in the world, one of them being Iran, where we've taken, in my view, a very pusillanimous view.
Now, here's a question for you, because you might have more insight than I do. The response from Iran, it seems, is chucking kinetic in any direction where there is a Western airbase or a Western military base, whether that is Azerbaijan, whether it's Erbil, whether it's Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, whether it's Cyprus, in fact. Now, we clearly were caught wanting when it came to the attack on Akrotiri. We weren't in the region. We didn't seem to be able to defend it straight away. Now, it's now been agreed that US bombers are going to be able to fly in and take off from the US Air Base in Gloucestershire, RAF Fairford. Now, I'm putting these things together. Someone said to me that what could well happen if militarily Iran are losing in the Middle East is they will start activating IRGC sleeper cells across the world and start committing acts of terrorism on the soil of their enemies. We already saw that Brize Norton was woefully defended when Palestine Action managed to get in there and start lobbing paint and rubbish all over our military jets. So my question now, there's already going to be a protest outside RAF Fairford today, is if the IRGC in Britain, where no doubt there are sleeper cells, decided, because RAF Fairford's now going to be engaged by the Americans, they wanted to go and cause havoc, can we defend it?
Well, we should certainly be using the full force of the law. If it's illegal to support Palestine Action, then it should be illegal to support demonstrations in favour of the IRGC, who are, as we speak, bombing our allies, who are sending drones against civilian targets, including UK citizens who happen to be living in the region and where we know there are very large numbers. And this is just a government where the lack of concern about our national security is mind-blowing. And let's put this against the backdrop of the UK's wider problems, where last year the government borrowed £140 billion and 105 billion went for debt interest, which is twice the size of our defence budget. This is a country that really needs to get a grip on its public finances, or we will find that the biggest threat to our national security in the future is our addiction to debt, not just the aggressive intent of some of our enemies abroad.
And when did this rot set in terms of defence? You're a former defence secretary. It's quite clear that this isn't just the Labour government. This isn't just a year and a half of underinvestment and failure to make sure we are sort of war ready. This has been going on for far longer than that. So my question is, where does the buck stop?
Well, partly our problem is that we have had such poor public finances for a long time that we've been unable to invest in defence in the way that we want. That's number one. But number two, there's been a lack of will of governments to do that, preferring to raise our welfare spending rather than our national security. And it's a question of political priorities. We took a big cut in defence at the end of the Cold War, the so-called peace dividend, but we never recognised that that was only due to the circumstances at the time. And if circumstances changed, defence spending had to go up. And I think this is a key failure in recent British politics, which is the failure to recognise that defence spending is not discretionary spending. It's not like welfare spending or even health spending or education spending. When the threat level goes up, the spending level needs to go up. The danger is that we have recognised the increased complexity and danger of what's out there in terms of security, but have been too slow to act. And I think that has been a generic problem for some time. And I think it's been a more acute problem under the current government, where even if they had the money, there seems to be a big element inside the current Labour government that doesn't want to see it spent on defence, would much rather see it spent on an increasingly expensive welfare system. That, in the long term, will mark a serious decline and serious danger for the UK.
When you were Defence Secretary, were you sitting around the Cabinet table banging it saying, we need more money? And were you ignored?
We did ask for more money, of course, but at the time, if you remember, when the coalition government, as it was, came to office, we had the worst public finances since the war, and we had to make public spending cuts across Whitehall. I regret the fact that at the time, we were increasing spending on aid, but reducing spending on defence. I think that was the wrong decision to take. Many of us said so at the time. We did set a path at that point for increased defence spending across the decade, and we did see it. But I think that while we did that, we didn't realise that we needed to accelerate that faster because of the dangers that we're facing from an increasingly belligerent Russia and increasingly dangerous China, not to mention what Iran was already doing through its proxies of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. All of this has been, I think, a real problem in the West, which is that wishful thinking has driven our defence and our security policy far too much.
Liam, it's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you so much for your candour and your wisdom. Former Defence Secretary there, Sir Liam Fox. I'm going to read some messages because there's brilliant ones coming in, can I just say. HMS Dragon, the only boat Starmer has managed to stop crossing the channel. You've got to laugh, haven't you? Morning, Alex. I agree something smells very funny. As also there is the collapse of the British spying trial now, the arrest of a Labour politician's husband on possible Chinese spying charges, as well as the Chagos Islands saga. It doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't sit right with me either. Plus, you can add to that the fact that they keep bimbling over to China every 5 seconds to go and hang out with Xi Jinping. We are going to be discussing that, of course. Massive story. The Labour MP's husband, who was arrested on suspicion of spying for China. We are going to be discussing that a bit later on in the show. Memo to our enemies. If you're planning to attack us, please give us 7 days' notice so we can get our navy ready. Love, Sir Keir Starmer. That's from Paul in Southend. Well, quite, and I like this one. The best quote I ever heard was from the SNP. All right, then. A shiver ran across the front bench of the opposition, but couldn't find a spine to run up. How apt. A very good quote that is as well. OK, we're going to be taking a short break. By the way, the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is making a speech right now announcing a number of reforms to the UK's asylum system. Well, better late than never, love. That is going to go far enough. We'll also bring you the updates and headlines from that as well. OK, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere because there's lots to talk about. We are going to be talking about migration just after this.
The Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, what your gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. First of all, before we start chewing over Shabana Mahmood's speech on migration, which is currently presenting live in Westminster, let's have a catch-up with one of our favourites. It's Georgina in London. Good morning to you, Georgina.
Good morning, my darling. I had to ring you. I wasn't going to ring today, Alex, because I seem to be ringing all the time and people are getting sick and tired of hearing my voice, and I can't say that I blame them. But, do you know, I was watching those idiots, honestly, I can't even think of a word to describe them, doing the cha-cha slide. Now, I've danced since the age of 4, and I love dancing. But you know what, my darling, there's a time and a place. But when we've got a world war on the horizon, people can't afford to pay the bills. They're going to put the bills up now because of this war that's going on. You know, we've got grandmas and granddads who can't eat the homes. We can't even fill our car now because there's bloody queues at the gas station a mile long, and you can't afford to go out. You can't afford to buy your food because it's like paying a mortgage repayment when you go and do your shopping. It's absolutely ridiculous. And these morons are dancing. What the heck's going on? What are we paying these people for? You know,
right.
Honestly, it's taking my breath away, Alex, and I really don't think that this country can cope with much more of this stupidity from this government. They've got so much going on.
They don't know what they're doing. I thought it was utterly incredulous that, Saturday, we know a war's begun, we know it's big, we know it's spreading, we know how serious it's going to be, and then that ridiculous Rachel Reeves decides to go ahead with a string statement going, these are the OBR forecasts, we're doing really well, interest rates are being kept down. I'm like, mate, you should have put that thing in the shredder leader stood up and said, we're about to end a very difficult period. I haven't got the entire plan yet, but these are the things I'm going to do to protect you because energy prices are going to go up, because global inflation is going to go up. Instead, she just carried on reading that blimmin' speech like it was happy days, like we were living in the sunlit uplands and nothing was happening. I think they just don't know what they're doing. I think they are, frankly speaking, not fit enough to babysit your dog, let alone run the country. Georgina, always great to hear from you, and we always welcome your calls. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see Shabana Mahmood there behind a lectern in London. That's at the Institute for Public Policy Research, a left-wing think tank. She is giving her speech on toughening up migration rules. Although 40 Labour MPs are going to rebel against any new laws promised by Mahmood, which are actually modelled on reforms made by the Danish government. The Danish government is a left-wing government, so of course you can copy what they're doing because they're also in the leftist club. Let's speak now to Laurie Wastall, Associate Editor of The Daily Sceptic. And sceptic indeed I am about what she is saying. So, for instance, included in her speech is they're going to scrap the duty to support, which requires financial and accommodation assistance to be given to asylum seekers who'd otherwise be destitute. Help will not be offered to those with a right to work, anyone who's made themselves destitute, or people who break the law, including by working illegally. Now, that sounds good. I agree with that. I think brilliant. Why should we be helping these people? But if we don't deport them, we're going to end up with those blooming camp cities like they have in Ireland, like they have in America, like we're starting to see already. Where's the plan?
Quite well. It's a good point you raise, Alex. I mean, I think this change does sound like a major measure, and that is a lot of what Shabana Mahmood has been going for repeatedly with many of the changes that she's bringing in. But yes, the devil is always in the details. So this one is actually an EU asylum law that we brought onto our own statute book in 2005. So one question is, which we get into more later if we like, is the Labour politics of it. Will her MPs let her actually implement these changes, because it will require a change in the law, but also that duty that is enshrined there with this particular bit of EU law to not allow asylum seekers to go destitute is one of the duties we have. But local councils, for instance, have other duties, simply to house the homeless or and other things like that. Which will still apply most of the time. So there's a strong rhetoric that we're seeing on measures like this may not actually be matched by the reality, which is that, and as you say, there's the question of whether we're supporting them, but there's also the much more important question of whether they're in the country at all. And in many ways, yes, we don't like having to pay out money to people being in hotels, but at least we know where they are. And if they're just running around the streets, perhaps working illegally, or perhaps, we have no idea where they are at all, and they could be menacing members of the community.
Well, that's it. They just shouldn't be in the country. We want to hear about how they're going to get people out of the country, how they're going to stop people coming into the country in the first place. I find this bit a bit rich. She's sort of pushing back against the Greens, who are absolute psychopaths. Oh, they just don't want borders at all. In fact, they want anyone who wants to come to Britain to automatically get immediate medical care, immediately get a house, immediately get financial support, whoever they are. And she's hit back against Zach Polanski. OK, good, because he's a nutter. A party leader who seeks the highest office in the land should not be on the beaches of France helping migrants cross onto small boats. But I have this memory of a picture circling social media of basically Shabana Mahmood doing essentially that.
Indeed, and I think the other famous one is obviously her predecessor as Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, with that famous refugees welcome banner. And likewise, I mean, there have been lots of about turns that Labour have been really forced to make on these issues. I think, to give her credit, I think Shabana Mahmood does actually want to get some of this stuff done. It's true that, as I've said, she sort of leads with the most flashy elements of it, which can be a little misleading as to how effective it might be. But the fact is that the bulk of the Labour Party are going to be very resistant to a lot of this. I mean, we've seen the fact that Morgan McSweeney, of course, Keir Starmer's former chief of staff, has now been defenestrated. This was for a number of reasons, of course, mostly over Mandelson, but also because a lot of people in the party didn't like the fact that he had the aim, at least, of positioning Labour more to the right, and the grassroots of the Labour Parliamentary Party did not like this at all. That's one signal that they're going to find it much more difficult now to get any of this agenda across. And of course, Shabana Mahmood herself had been a long-term ally of Morgan McSweeney, so now she will be finding herself a little bit more isolated.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's almost not worth listening to what she has to say because it won't go far enough and it won't be supported by her backbenchers, so we may as well just not bother. But what she has said as part of her slate of initiatives is that migrants will have to speak English to A-level standard before they can settle permanently in Britain. How about they have to just be able to speak English fluently?
Well, quite. It's a strange sort of, nitpicking standard there. I think some people have tried to claim that that's very stringent because I think confusing the idea and thinking that it means you have to have sort of an A level in English literature. That's not what that is. This is quite basic, actually. And yes, of course, we should have some kind of sound, whether it's A level or something higher. But yeah, fluency would be a good one too. But again, I think many of these changes, people, your viewers will be asking, why didn't we have that before? I mean, why were we giving citizenship to people who couldn't speak English in the first place? Why, for instance, in Gorton and Denton, as Matt Goodwin has been detailing recently, did he go to so many constituencies where people, or parts of the constituency rather, where people simply didn't speak English? And that's one factor in the way that vote went. But I think a lot of people will be asking why there's so many communities up and down our country in which English is not spoken well, and is this to the benefit of the British taxpayer and the British state more broadly?
What do you think she should be saying? What sort of things should be immediately put in place? Because we know we're facing a migration crisis. We know our porous borders are also a security threat to this country. We know society is balkanised and divided because people haven't integrated. Where should she be beginning?
Well, some of the measures that she has been at least announcing do sound promising. I mean, one of them is this pledge to completely restrict student visas for countries including Afghanistan, Cameroon, and two others, which are basically war-torn countries in which that loophole essentially has been abused for many years. The idea that you would come over on a student visa, supposedly you're the brightest and best in the world, and then would claim asylum and be that burden on the state. So it's right to be cracking down on those. But as ever, she's sort of dipping her toe in, but not really going the whole way, because in fact, the countries that are abusing that system the most, the main perpetrator here is Pakistan. That's about 5,000 people on student visas last year alone applied for asylum from Pakistan, and there are several other countries that might be thought of there. Likewise, we know that in particular the Somali community in Britain, whether that's coming on an unskilled visa or through potentially the student visa as well, have very negative outcomes in terms of requiring welfare assistance, for instance, and potentially claiming asylum too. And again, the question has to be asked, is this to the benefit of the British taxpayer? Is this the kind of migration that we want to be seeing? I think the vast majority of the public would be saying no. But so there's an unwillingness to look at the hard cases here, and rather just to sort of say, well, we're going to take a few measures and sort of see how that lands.
Laurie, fantastic catching up with you, as always. Associate Editor there of the Daily Sceptic, Laurie Wastell. Let's do a couple of messages before we go and take a little reprieve. Morning, Alex. What's the truth behind the rumour of offering migrants £40,000 to return from whence they came within the week? Well, I don't know. We'll look into that for you. But when you think of how much these people end up costing over the course of a lifetime, even over the span of a year, I'm not necessarily against giving someone a financial incentive, although will it be a pull factor? If people think, if I go to the UK and break in illegally, I might be able to get 10 grand or 40k in my pocket and go home, a lot of people will be trying to do it. And what disgusts me most is the complete dismissal of Islamist's regime of the threat to our people from the ever-growing, already sizable Islamist element, and the constant grovelling instead to their leaders. I know, well, it is deeply worrying, isn't it? OK, right, we're going to take a short break now, but you must stay tuned, because coming up after the break, this utterly breathtaking China spy case, where one of 3 people arrested yesterday on suspicion of spying for China is the husband of a Labour MP. How bad is it? How infiltrated is the Labour Party? We're going to be discussing that with security and intelligence expert Professor Anthony Glees just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, my brilliant producer, Ted, see what I did there, Ted? He's going to have a little smile at me now. Oh, he's not even listening. My brilliant producer, Ted, just rushed it in this copy. He's great, he is. He's managed to dig this out. So, you know, I said that Shabana Mahmood was criticising Zach Polanski, saying they shouldn't be there on the beaches of France trying to help people, trying to come into the country illegally. Right, let's look at this then, shall we? October the 15th, 2015. The New Statesman. Author, Shabana Mahmood. What am I doing here? The article begins. Well, good question, Shabana. I asked myself that question a lot during the 3 days that I spent on the Greek island of Lesbos last week, working with a group of Birmingham-based volunteers to provide aid and assistance to refugees as they land on the shores of Europe. I asked myself that question as I helped get people off dangerously overfull dinghies, as I tried to block out the screams of a small child terrified by the dangerous boat journey he had just survived, as I found myself knee-deep in wet clothes discarded by refugees, trying to find anything that could be salvaged. Shabana, mate, if I were you, I'd remember that you wrote this article before saying that in your speech, you absolute moron. For crying out loud. We'll see if we can get some juicy pictorial evidence of all of this as well. I do love it when politicians are found to be hypocritical. Right, let's go back to this utterly staggering story of the fact that 2 Blair-era government advisors have been arrested alongside a Labour MP's husband in a China spy probe. This is not the first time the Labour Party appear to be in hock with Beijing and infiltrated by Chinese spies. Let's speak to Professor Anthony Glees, security and intelligence expert. This is remarkable. If we're not for a big old war going on in the Middle East, this would have sent political shockwaves everywhere. How close are people in the Labour Party, do you think, to the CCP?
Well, I think it's a more general problem than that, Alex. I think this is an extremely disturbing story, but it's actually only one of 2 major Chinese espionage stories, allegations we should underline at this stage, 2 Chinese spying stories in the UK at the moment. First of all, what appears to be the Chinese intelligence operations against the Welsh Labour Party, involving an MP, although she says she's never been to China. What that has to do with the price of fish, I'm totally unsure. But she's a Labour MP, and her partner is apparently very influential in Welsh Labour circles and even stood for elected office, which he didn't get in Wales. But at the same time, we've got an equally disturbing case that goes in a completely different direction, involving 2 former Hong Kong police officers and a Brit who the allegations claim were spying on Hong Kong pro-democracy activists and their families here in the UK. And the Brit involved allegedly had access to Home Office databases, so got really into the areas which one would hope China was kept out of. So these 2 things, and add to that Chinese espionage, attempts to get close to the Prince, formerly known as Andrew, or Andrew, formerly known as Prince. You've got a rich picture, actually, of China trying to cover all bases. So Labour seems to be particularly vulnerable, it's true. But everywhere you look, there is Chinese espionage. And what is totally staggering for people like me is that we have just agreed to give the Chinese this super embassy in Royal Mint Court in London, making it the largest Chinese diplomatic mission anywhere in the UK and Europe. So, you know, things look very, very unpleasant and dangerous, and it is staggering that we're not doing enough about this.
let's talk about that embassy, because when you look at the blueprint, it's big, it's deep, it's got, cavernous underground elements to it. But someone said to me that, that the biggest concern here is the cables that it is in close proximity to. And those cables, and I don't understand the world of IT, but those cables' connections to things like the development of quantum computing. Can you explain more about that?
Well, what needs to be said is, first of all, that the claim that well, it's not a claim, it's a fact that very sensitive computer cables, because many people, you say, where is cyberspace? And they point up there. But actually, cyberspace is chiefly down there. It runs along cables under the ground. And there is an extremely sensitive set of cables that run right next to Royal Mint Court, where the super embassy is going to be, allowing the Chinese to tap very easily. It's for technicians, it's a very simple matter. You just put a plug on the cables, and everything that goes through the cables then goes into your premises and can be carefully.
What sort of stuff are we talking about, though? Because this is the thing. I understand the sensitive information cables, the Chinese can infiltrate them, but what will they be gaining from that? Why is it so sensitive?
That's the point. They gain everything. They want to touch all bases. They have a different attitude towards the UK from, say, the Russians or the Iranians or what have you. I really do believe that the Chinese see an opportunity of pulling the UK into their economic realm. They are colonialists every much as we were when we had our empire, and they see that we are moving away from the United States of America, not least because of American policy, unpredictable and reckless policy, in my view. And we are somewhat adrift from Europe. And that is an opportunity for China. And China is also going to be, in the years to come, much more approachable for us because of the unfreezing of the polar ice caps. So you got that whole northern route which cuts the cost enormously, exponentially, of shipping goods from Shanghai to Britain and from Britain into Europe. So I think that's their master plan. They don't necessarily, want to go around killing us and sabotage and the stuff that the Russians are busy doing and the Iranians would love to do. No, they want to know everything about us because they want to penetrate us, and they want us to feel and be led closer towards them. That's the real danger. And the super embassy allows them huge possibilities, not just to tap into electronic data, which fits into one particular box, but also to do the other things, recruit agents. The allegation is that one of the three people spying on the dissidents is a Brit, and also the three Welsh Labour people, again, allegations that they have broken the 2023 National Security Act. So wherever you look, Chinese eyes are watching, Chinese ears are listening, right into the House of Commons. And even if Ms. Reid said she's never been to China, she's never spoken about China, she has no interest in China, and for all we know, she doesn't talk about China to her husband at night time. Nevertheless, the Chinese have a strong interest in what goes on in Parliament. We will remember when the Labour MP Barry Gardiner, I think he took £500,000, an enormous sum of money, to run his office. He said he had no idea this was Chinese intelligence money. So that is their master plan. They see an opportunity. We're adrift, and they are going hell for leather, whether it's via the frozen north, whether it's via their super embassy here in London, and we are woefully unprepared. Now, I should just add, in the interests of accuracy, we are told by Sir Keir Starmer's government that both MI5 and MI6 are perfectly happy with the super embassy. They feel they can cope with the threat, and it is also true with these two cases that MI5 do appear to have been alert. They're feeling the collars of these people. People like me, however, would respond, they could be just the tip of the iceberg. MI5 has got them. How many people are there out there who are in the pay of the Chinese one way or another, about whom we don't know? And I would suspect is a very large number, not least in my own profession of higher education and universities. So this must be taken more seriously by the government.
This government, though, however, seems to be more than willing to go over to China every few minutes to glad hand members of the Chinese Communist Party to try and do deals. And it concerns me that China is going to get deeper and deeper infiltrated within areas of critical infrastructure. If that is the case, how do we then disentangle ourselves from China? How do we break out of Beijing's Gordian knot in the future?
Well, my own view, I'm not sure is necessarily going to be the same as your view. I think this is a common European problem. And I think we have to work together with our European partners and allies in sealing off Europe. And that means Europe also has to do the things, for example, to stop people crossing the channel in small boats, that make it politically possible for us to put on a united front. But we shouldn't ignore the fact that China has already infiltrated into a number of European countries. In Greece, for example, the Greek harbour of Piraeus, totally rebuilt by the Chinese, now belongs to China, and everything that was used to rebuild the port came from China, even the nuts and the bolts and the screws. So there was no advantage to Greece, except that they got a port that allowed Chinese container ships to come in. And it's the Caribbean and the east coast of Africa also prime targets for Chinese influence. So the trouble with America, the troubles with Trump and Netanyahu, the troubles with evil, odious Putin, for China, they spell opportunity and a chance to expand their economy. And they will offer, we've got a government scrabbling around to grow the economy and pay for the defense we need so urgently. Where do we get this growth from? President Xi will say the answer is very simple: where you get this growth from us.
Well, no, this is what they do. They undercut your market. They offer their services for cheap, building your standard gauge railways and your dry ports because they want to control the arterial trade routes. Anthony, thank you very much. It's always brilliant talking to you. I appreciate you giving up your time to get us so well informed today. Right, you lot, time for you to chat with me. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. I'd love to have a conversation with you. That's right, you haven't called before, so maybe this is the time that you get something off your chest. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number to send a text. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you write your message, OK? We're taking a little break, but don't go anywhere because I'm back straight after.
Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, what you gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. A lot going on today, isn't there? And a lot of things to talk about. So let's see what is on the mind of Chris, who is in Hereford. Hi, Chris.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm not bad. We live in crazy times. Who knows how much longer it'll go on for? But otherwise, in good spirits.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I was just like infuriated. I was watching Jeremy's show this morning, and all those MPs were dancing in what doing the come dancing. I noticed one of my local MP was right in the front of the thing doing that and all that, and I understand that she's doing it right for mental health. Now, I understand that, and mental health is the most important thing. But there's a lot more important things in the world that it's going on at the moment. And to be honest, I contacted her about 12 months ago regarding a local issue, right? And she has not received. I've sent numbers of emails, and I've not received one email, anything from the Green Party about my concerns about my local environment and where I live, sort of thing. And she's too busy bloody sorting out what's happening in Iran and bloody what's happening, excuse my language. But it really infuriates me that she was elected for my local issues, but she's more interested in national things and stuff like that, and I think it's just ridiculous.
Do you know what? I think a lot of people now in politics, and I would say particularly those on the left wing, are in it because they want to be basically second-rate celebrities. They want to pop up on TV programmes and cut ribbons. They're not particularly politically engaged. They don't really have any sort of sensible, adult, grown-up political conviction, and they don't really care about their constituents. I mean, look at Angela Rayner, for instance, when all that kicked off about her getting a second home. To me, the most egregious part of all of that is she is literally moving to the other side of the country from the people that she's supposed to represent. Nobody said that. They banged on about whether she had paid the right tax or not, and I was like, surely the big issue here is she's the MP for somewhere in the northwest and she's moving down to the southeast. That's absolutely stark raving bonkers. Who is your MP, by the way, Chris?
Ellie Jones.
And she's a Green?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry for you, mate. I'm sorry. Roll on the next election. But given that they're crazy, those Greens, but given that there seem to be enough brainwashed, ludicrous people who are willing to vote for them, I don't think they're going to go anywhere very quickly. Chris, thank you ever so much. Beautiful part of the world, Hereford. I love it down there. Some really good cider as well. That's right. Let's speak now to Elaine in Scotland. Hi, Elaine.
Hello, Alex. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm fine. Alex, first of all, I want to say to you, as a very passionate woman, I absolutely have followed you for a very long time. If it wasn't for my partner, I would never have known, so I want to thank him as well. But what I want to say to you at this moment in time is that this morning, you absolutely got my blood going in the passion, because I absolutely agreed with everything you said, and every single person that you have had on from the military downwards, and my partner actually is an ex-retired major who knew one of I think, the Rear Admiral that you had on. So absolutely backing everything you said. But what I want to say is, somebody who lives in the beautiful part of Scotland in the Scottish borders, I have witnessed our government taking in money from the Chinese, as in Nicola Sturgeon, all the fraudulent behaviour, the connectivity with, the likes of our Alex Salmond of that time, and we uncovered some time ago, way back in the times when we were, trying to keep our union together, that he had been involved with the Russians. So we are very aware. Those enlightened people in Scotland are very aware of the infiltration of monies and the lure of, helping supposedly to build our Scotland, which is absolutely fraudulent. And then I want to go on to where we are now, there's dangerous times where I couldn't see myself dancing in any foyer for whatever cause, because the priority at the moment is first and foremost to protect our borders, which has the complete knock-on effect to everybody from our women and our children in our streets. And it has been a slow progression. As my father said many years ago, who was in the Royal Navy, that this has been going on for a long time. Cells have been laid amongst our shores and are still here. And they will be here. And at a point, they could be ignited. Yeah. And so what's happening, and it's exactly why you've got the rise of the Greens, absolutely atrocious, fraudulent, they don't stand for a Green Party. They have prostituted themselves to get the vote. And I don't know what else to say to you. I think it's all been said before. I am totally behind the cause. I am a reformer as well. I would stand beside anybody. I am not afraid to say what I think, and I think more and more people are beginning to wake up, Alex.
I think you're right on that. But what is so frightening is just as we sort of got a bit of promise that we might have a radical change of government and the legacy parties would toast, up pops the Greens, like you said. And there's some sort of parasite that infects slugs or snails. I can't remember which, but it sort of takes over their brains and then they become the host and they basically become zombie slugs. And I kind of feel the Green Party is a bit like that. They're supposed to be eco-warriors, but they are being used, abused, exploited, completely dominated as a vessel by Islamists. They just want it because they want to get seats. They don't care. They're all ridiculous hippies anyway. But they don't know that they're going to be used, abused, exploited and abandoned at the end of the day. They are essentially the slug with the zombie parasite now taking over its blimmin' brain. Elaine, thank you very, very much for calling. Let's speak now to Claire, who's in Somerset. Hi, Claire.
Hi there. Thanks for a great show. I'm trying to keep it cool. I'm so furious. My daughter, who's pregnant after 4 miscarriages, she's in Abu Dhabi with her husband. And trying to get her out, trying to escape. She's been told by British Airways the flight on Friday has been cancelled. And they've put them on a new flight to Doha, then maybe Britain, in the coming days. Well, why would you fly from Abu Dhabi that's being bombed and bombed and bombed? Not very much on the news about Abu Dhabi. But why would a stupid British Airways flight go from Abu Dhabi to war-torn Doha? The nonsense of it is unbelievable. I'd like to say the UAE has been absolutely amazing at shooting down the bombs that have gone off every night and evening, almost, bar one night when they did sleep and they weren't sent to the car park in the basement for security. But thank God for the UAE, 10 out of 10. And this bloody government, let's get rid of them once and for all. They've wrecked Britain, they've wrecked the farmers, the food, the pubs, everything that is good in.
Oh, sorry, Ofcom, we can't say that. All right, big, sincere apologies there. At the end of the day, look, I really understand you're upset, but I've got to do a very sincere apology because my neck's on the line when curse words appear on this programme. But no, please carry on, Claire, because it must be so stressful, so stressful. What is it like? I mean, how frightened is she? Because you're right, we're not really seeing from the inside what is going on over there in the UAE.
Well, suddenly they're on the beach or suddenly they're outside having dinner and there's a frickin' explosion over them. Or there's an explosion down the beach which is intercepted and it's the biggest, loudest bang. They are so frightened. I mean, I got caught in the uprising in Egypt in 2011 with tanks and tear gas and bombs going off and you couldn't get out of the country. It was so frightening and they are very frightened. But the trouble is that Britain are doing nothing. Starmer, this government that's so hopeless is doing nothing for the people. They'll take your money. They won't do a damn thing for the
I mean, there was supposed to be rescue flights, weren't there, taking off from Oman, but for whatever reason, due to technical issues, that flight's been delayed. But my understanding is Qatar Airways have stepped up. It's like the government can't do anything. So it's like, oh, France, can you go protect Cyprus? Oh, Greece, can you go protect Cyprus? Oh, Qatar Airways, can you evacuate our people, please? But they have stepped up and said that they will be running regular flights now out of various airports around the Middle East to take Europeans back home. So I suppose we do need to thank Qatar Airways. I'm assuming that is part of the programme that your daughter's been offered to join.
Well, I've had a lot of talk, but nothing's been happening. And as far as the pilot that should have taken off last night, who, oh dear, whoopsie daisy, he's a bit sleepy. He's got to have a bit of sleep. Listen, there's a war going on. Get off your pants and get going. Those people out. I'm nearly 70 years old. I'm staggered. Britain used to be a great country. What's happened? Wake up, you people, wake up.
It is terrifying seeing what's happened. And basically, we've been exposed as being incompetent, under-resourced, ill-prepared, having no conviction, ideology. Considering there's an emergency going on, it staggers me. The Labour government are just giving their little speeches like it's business as usual. Where is Starmer addressing the nation? Well, he's not doing it because he doesn't know what to say. He's a coward. He's weak. He's pathetic. He's clueless. No doubt Richard Irma's sitting there deciding what his next move is going to be because the man is clearly just a puppet. OK, right, we're going to be taking a short break, but in the final hour of the programme, straight after the break, we're going to be joined by the excellent Mesa Gifford, who is a former British volunteer fighter in Syria, to talk about Iraqi Kurds going in on the ground into Iran. That's just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the programme. Alex Phillips here with you up until 1 o'clock. Final hour of the show now. So if you want to have your thoughts aired, it's time to get them in. 03444991000 is the number to send me a WhatsApp message. 8722 is the number to send me a text message. Like the word talk before you text. And you can also dial 03444991000 if you want to have a chit chat with me later, because after this segment, we're going to be taking your calls. So roll up, roll up. It is time for your free therapy with Auntie Alex. Right, just want to update you actually. Asylum seeker families are being offered £40,000 to leave Britain. I mean, look, I get it in a way, because apparently to house a family of four, it would cost the state £158,000 every single year. So giving a family of four 40 grand to get out, I suppose, saves us money. And £40,000 back in Pakistan or Afghanistan, or that goes a long way. That's probably like an entire lifetime salary. But I do wonder if that also could act as a bit of a draw for people. If they think they can get here, get that money and go home, well, they might risk it. But there you go. That is now officially confirmed as the Home Secretary is continuing to make her speech in Westminster about asylum. She's also suspending visa routes for 4 countries. Really not going far enough, in my opinion, but well, I suppose it's a tiny little pigeon step in the right direction. Let's focus again back on what is going on in the Middle East, as everything seems to be escalating over there. Everyone said, oh, what is the plan? Is it going to be regime change? Or if it's going to be regime change, we need boots on the ground. I think there's always been a plan. I've said previously that Iran has been the West's foe for 50 years, not just since October the 7th, 2023. We've had the measure of Iran for a long time, since crazy people like Ahmadinejad decided he wanted to hate America, hate Britain, hate the West, big Satan, little Satan. I'm fairly certain it's one of the most surveilled states when it comes to the West's enemies on earth, and I have a feeling there'll be quite a sophisticated programme, and I do hope that it does result in a regime change. Well, part of that, it appears, is a ground invasion being launched against Iran by thousands of US-backed Kurdish fighters. The Kurdish militias are based across the border in Iraq, I'm assuming that's Kurdistan there, began the offensive in northwestern Iran today. Well, let's speak to Mesa yesterday, in fact. Let's speak to Mesa Gifford, former British volunteer fighter in Syria, who knows a thing or two about the brave Kurds. Mesa, brilliant to have you on the programme. Now, what do you make of this? I mean, first of all, I think it's fascinating that the Kurds sort of stand there, prepared and ready to go and do work on behalf of the West, when by and large we don't treat them very well.
You're absolutely right. It's not too long ago that we saw the government of Syria's offensive against the Kurds in northeastern Syria, which saw a number of men, women, and children killed, and the region taken over by the central government. Time and time again, we've let the Kurds down. But then again, the Kurds are one of our most reliable allies in the region. They are overwhelmingly secular. They believe in progressive values. They believe in democracy. They've been allied with us against ISIS, against Al-Qaeda, and now they're going against the repressive and repulsive Iranian regime. Now, I think they'll be very cautious now over the next couple of weeks. I don't know exactly which countries are supporting them. The US is being a bit hesitant in saying how much support and how much intelligence they're sharing with them, but it'll be very interesting to see how the next couple of weeks develops. Is there a risk here? Because we have this habit in the West of when we talk about countries, assuming they're just one sort of unified block of people. But Iran, like many countries in that region, is quite tribal. It's got various different communities with different interests. Is there a risk here that actually, if there is a regime change, what we're left is is a sort of balkanised, clan-based, splintered country that can't come together? Absolutely. That is a definite risk. And I think that's where the US, the UK, etc., need to be very clear with their allies on the ground. When they do work with opposition groups, they need to have a vision for Iran, one that is unified, one that is that has a plan for the future, essentially, to include all the different minority groups. There's the Baluch, there's Arabs, there's Kurds. I mean, it is a very diverse nation and a very historic and ancient one too. And it is very much in their interest and in ours that it doesn't fracture and balkanize and and break out into civil war. But that's the key: is communicating with the allies, making sure they know exactly what they're after and what the goal is, and come up with a plan together.
Do you have any idea sort of what sort of numbers we're talking about and how effective this ground invasion might be? I mean, my understanding is America is there helping to equip them, which is good. But are they numerous enough to actually be able to take on the regime and win?
Well, the Kurds are ferocious fighters. I think everyone knows that. There are a number of different Kurdish groups that believe in different things. There are socialist groups, there's tribal-based groups as well. So they're not 100% unified across the board when it comes to their resistance against Iran. And that's, again, something that needs to be worked with. There needs to be dialogue in the West with the ground partners to come up with a plan, essentially, because if they go in, it'll primarily be in small towns and villages in the mountainous regions of sort of northwestern Iran, and they won't be marching into Tehran anytime soon, but they certainly could take back a great deal of a huge amount of sort of Kurdish land and Kurdish areas.
Now, there is one slight question mark for me hanging over the Kurds, and I like you. I like the Kurds very much, but there is also a connection between Iraqi Kurds in particular and huge waves of people trafficking into the country. Is there a risk, actually, that there might be people who are now being funded, aided and armed by the CIA who could then make money and contribute to these huge illegal migratory flows coming into Europe?
No, I don't think so at all. You're absolutely right. There is a huge problem with Kurdish gangs, primarily in the UK, people trafficking, drug trafficking, etc. That's very much a UK issue. Those people predominantly have come here and sought British citizenship, and that's very much our problem. When it comes to the politics on the ground over there, whether they're supporting these sort of activities in the UK, I have absolutely no doubt that there's not the case. These people are very much after their freedom and independence on the ground in the Kurdish regions of Iran, and they deserve freedom. As I said, they are our greatest allies in the region. They believe in the very much the same values as we do, and it's in our interest to see Iran come together and resist against the Iranian regime, which is one of the most repulsive, theocratic, appalling regimes on the planet.
Now, talking about the theocratic regime of Iran and their mindset, and also about the waves of illegal migrants coming into Europe, we know that terrorist organisations make money out of people trafficking, not just drug dealing and all the rest of it. We also know they use these exposed routes in order, no doubt, to get their terrorists into Europe and across the West. They fund and export terrorism across the world. We now also are being told, and this is no surprise, a top Iranian cleric has issued a fatwa calling for Muslims to avenge the blood of the martyr Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And someone said to me the other day, well, the problem is, when Iran, because they have this sort of nihilistic, theocratic ideology, when they're going to start losing in the theatre of war in the Middle East, they could well then sort of press the trigger on igniting lots of sleeper cells around Europe to wreak destruction on our own soil. How much of a concern do you think that is for Brits?
Well, it is a concern. That's why we should be properly funding MI5, MI6 to make sure we're kept safe. There is, you're absolutely right, there's a domestic element to this, terrorism and crime, but there's also an international element, how we want to see the world sort of order framed, how we can build peace in the region. Those two have their own unique challenges. Now, I think one thing that we've learned the hard way over the last couple of days is that Britain has not invested enough in its air defence. We are letting down our partners in Cyprus and elsewhere. Now, if we're letting them down and the odd attack is getting through, then what happens if we're attacked here in the UK? We really need to be investing in the armed forces right now to keep ourselves into the future, safe into the future, and also into MI5 and MI6 to make sure the security services have the resources to track these people down. There are tens of thousands of people on the UK terror watch list, and we have suffered terrible attacks over the last few years, from Manchester to London, and we just may need to make sure that we have the resilience and the resources and the sort of desire to protect ourselves and the aggression that's needed to keep ourselves safe.
So where do you stand on the idea that there's going to be a pro-Iranian regime march coming up, the Al-Quds March? Is this an opportunity, perhaps, for our security services to look at who's taking part and be able to identify people? Is it quite useful this is happening in the open air so we get eyes on and that these people aren't operating entirely underground? Or is this provocative? Is this potentially a way of organisations such as the IRGC to start grooming and recruiting people?
Well, both. I mean, the UK security services will no doubt, and the police in particular, will be at the march, and they'll be filming and they'll be analysing who's in the crowd. I suspect a vast majority of them will be the usual useful idiots that come out in support of terror organisations and fascist regimes all over the world. A lot of these people, they know what they're fighting against, but they don't know what they're fighting for. And all they care about is who's against the UK, who's against America. And those are the people we're going to support, even if they hang gay people from lampposts or butcher their own people in the tens of thousands. So, yes, there's going to be a lot of useful idiots on the streets over the next few weeks and months. But I think where the UK government's concerned, we need to be focusing on what our plan is for Iran and what we can do to resolve the crisis there as soon as possible. Because at the moment, we're looking as if we're a bit redundant on the world stage. And that's not how we want to be seen. And that's certainly not the future of the United Kingdom as far as I'm concerned. So we need to knuckle down and get started, because this war is going to drag on for a while.
What would you like to see the UK do militarily? I mean, is this just about defending our assets and our interests, our servicemen and women and our expats abroad? Or should we be getting into the action with US, with Israel, to try and get this regime toppled as soon as possible? Or does that risk potential reprisals on home soil?
Well, we have been attacked already. So whether or not we want this war to start, the war started without our desire for it. The war has come to us without our desire for it, even though we didn't join in on the attack. So Iran very much has sucked us into this conflict already. I think everything should be on the table. I'm not necessarily saying, certainly no boots on the ground, certainly nothing like that. But in regards to strikes back on Iran in response to attacks on us, that's certainly something that should be considered. But also, we need to be playing to our strengths. Diplomacy, intelligence. We should be working alongside the Americans. The fact that it took us several days to even allow them to use our military bases was absurd, because we ended up doing it and we shot ourselves in the foot. So why deny it in the first place? So if they were going to do something, you need to get at least behind them and support them in that regard. So I think we need to start putting Britain first. We need to start thinking exactly how we can bring this conflict to a resolution, but also how we can start investing in ourselves to create the resilience and the strength to keep ourselves not just safe from Iran, but safe from many other threats around the world that's coming.
One thing that deeply worries me, because it seems now a lot of the top head honchos of the Iranian regime have been killed. You've got a huge arsenal now in the hands of Lord knows who. They seem to be chucking things left, right and centre. Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Doha. We know that they've got missiles with a long enough range to strike parts of Eastern and Central Europe, which thankfully I don't believe can reach our shores. But if we do have IRGC sleeper cells in the United Kingdom, and now we know that Fairford, the US airbase in Gloucestershire, is going to be mobilised for their bombers to come in and take off again, is there a risk that Iranian sleeper cells, terrorist sleeper cells, who quite frankly can buy a drone off of Amazon, could launch attacks in this country against our air bases? And I say this because it didn't seem too difficult for a load of Wallies from Palestine Action to break into Brize Norton.
Well, yeah, it's certainly a concern. I have to say we are very well protected in the UK. We're protected by the Channel. We are an island. We MI5, MI6 are tracking, as I said before, tens of thousands of not just terrorists, but also foreign agents. And we have found sleeper cells from places like Russia in the past. So it's more than possible that Iran could do the same. But that shouldn't deter us from first working with our international partners to see our interests in the region sorted, and also diplomatically as well. It shouldn't change anything. I think the UK has been threatened many times in the past. And the one thing that we've taught the world is you cannot threaten the UK with anything and make us back down. I think we need to support our security services, but not allow the threat of an attack on our soil deter us from what we know to be right and what we know to be in our interest.
Now, Mesa is one of mine. I'm going to say this sort of in jest, my favourite mercenaries out there. Are you itching to get the combats out the closet, or are you going to stick on British soil?
For now, I'm sticking on British soil. I'm watching the situation in the Middle East very closely. I've got a lot of friends in the Kurdish region of Iraq having conversations and talking to people and amongst themselves about what's going to happen in Iran. So I'm very interested to see what happens. But the most important thing is that Iran stays whole, united, and hopefully gets rid of this ghastly regime that has tortured it for so many years.
It's always a privilege to speak to you. Such a brave and incredible man, Mesa. Do keep us updated. The excellent Mesa Gifford there, former British volunteer fighter in Syria. He had a great job in the city and just went, do you know what? I don't like Islamic State and I'm going in there. What a man. That is British spirit. We love him. Right, OK, we're taking a short break now. After the break, I want to have a chit-chat with some of you, so give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Kieran is sitting there waiting to take down your details and patch you through to the studio. And by the way, the latest is that Spain is now going to join France, Italy and the Netherlands in sending its navy to protect Cyprus, including the British military base, of course, in the latest humiliation for Starmer, because our boat's not even leaving until next week. Then it's going to take a week to trundle there. Action will probably be over by then. Well, actually, it probably won't. But Spain, France, Italy and the Netherlands having to step up to look after us. I mean, it's embarrassing, quite frankly. Someone postcards to the leaders of those countries saying thank you from the British people. OK, the break is now coming, but it's your turn to have your voices on air just after this. So call me 0344 499 1000. Normal network rate and all that, so it doesn't cost you any more than you'd normally pay to phone anyone or anything. So what are you waiting for? I'll speak to some of you just after this.
The Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, or gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. And Betty has updated me saying B-2 bombers are the things coming out of Fairford. They will be heavily protected. If anyone tries to break in, they'll get shot. Well, let's wait to see. Do you know what? I live just up the road. I'm quite tempted to go down there and sit in the pub with my binos on and see what's coming in and out. I love military aircraft. I'm sort of perversely quite excited by this, but at the same time, semi-worried that it might kick off and Fairford could be targeted. But you're right. Whenever you go to, even when you go to Fairford Air Show, right, it's the biggest military air tattoo in the world. Riot, as it's called. It's all the countries around the world send their military aircraft stunts in the sky, exhibiting their prowess. When you're there, if you see something like a U-2 on the ground or an F-35, oh, the Americans are standing there with massive loaded guns. They don't mess around. Right, anyway, let's move on now because we're joined by the brilliant Annunziata Rees-Mogg, my former colleague, of course, in the European Parliament, now Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism. Good afternoon, Annunziata. First of all...
Hi, Alex.
First of all, we were obviously a brilliant lot, all sitting there in the European Parliament, high calibre, knew what we were doing. In fact, I don't know if you remember, most of the time we were the only people in that blimmin' hemicycle. Most people don't understand that MEPs don't actually do their jobs at all, and it was always the Brexit Party sitting there making the loudest noise, and we were the ones who wanted to leave it. But talking about the calibre of politicians, what do you make of that lot? All dancing around for mental health or something or the other, when essentially we're in a part of a world war.
It just makes them look so unserious that I know this was for charity. I know it was about mental health. But really, there are planes in the sky. There are bombs dropping on British citizens. Their evacuation flight didn't even work. The Cypriot base has been hit. What are they doing? On Tuesday, they knocked off 3 hours early. Because the government didn't give out in any time. Yesterday, they discussed defence for an hour. This is not a way to run a country. They need to get back and do their jobs. We need to have the defence investment plan that was promised in the autumn and still hasn't appeared. Pretty critical right now, I would have thought.
This is what's so staggering to me. You know, the fact that Rachel Rees went on and did the spring statement like it was business as usual. I'm like, you should have ripped that thing up and be saying, right, emergency funding to defence, emergency funding to repatriate Brits, emergency funding to pop up people because the fuel bills are going to soar. We're now going to, urgently go for exploratory drilling in the North Sea. That's how much we're going to spend on that. Instead, she just went along like it was nothing was happening. And where's Starmer? Where is he? He keeps saying Donald Trump doesn't have a plan. Would be great if we had one as well. Where are you, son?
He's waiting for Lord Hermer to tell him what his legal mates should think he should do. It is absolutely bereft of leadership at the moment, and it's the people suffering. I mean, I bought petrol yesterday, and it's already gone up 5p a litre. That could well head even further. We need to worry about what's happening to British people here and abroad, where there are undoubtedly, still bombs falling out of the sky, and we need to protect them. We need to get them home. We need to make sure they're safe. We need to have the defence capability to make us all safe. And this government is dancing. It's a joke.
It's alarming. And talking about this government, Andy Burnham on the move again. He, of course, was blocked from standing in Gorton and Denton. He's sniffing up other seats. He knows that he's not out of the game yet. But what is so concerning about this man is he's now talking about the need to have a coalition on the left, including the Green Party, to face down Reform UK. The Green Party, as far as I can see, are just useful idiots on behalf of people who, frankly, deeply scare me. People who I believe, at least part of them, have Islamist intent. Given that the left wing could well do this, and we've seen that happen in France, we've seen that happen in other parts of Europe where there's been rising populism and a populist party in a position to take control, that all the lunatics have got together and some of the less lunatic parties have allowed them, just so they've got the tyranny of numbers, to beat the party that probably has the best programme. With this in mind, and given how dangerous, quite frankly, the Green Party is, and what another 5 years of, and it won't be this sort of left-wing governance, it will be even more radical left-wing governance, quite what that would do to the country. Do we really need to be saying now to anybody on the right, look, the polls have been the same now for about 2 years. It's going to be reforms. It's going to be Nigel Farage. We've all got to get behind him because, quite frankly, the situation's too urgent.
Well, The latest polling seems to show that Reform is on 27%, the Tories are on 20%, the Greens on 19 in third, Labour down on 17, and the Lib Dems on 11. That gives the left and the right 47% each. It could be a very, very messy outcome. And I think all the parties will be looking at coalition options. Burnham is just saying the logical thing. Labour doesn't look like it's going to win any kind of majority, but it wants to keep power. It will do a deal with whoever it wants. It needs to cling on to power. I mean, I don't know if you remember when Gordon Brown in 2010 didn't move out of Downing Street, trying to discuss cooking up an SNP, Lib Dem mishmash to keep clinging on to power. And the left will do this. It's perfectly logical. But Burnham is desperate for power, and he wants to be Prime Minister. He's got this woman, what's her name, Marie Rimmer, who's supposedly going to stand down for him so he can get another seat if he's not blocked by the NEC again, which I suspect Keir would do. But it's this desperation for power, not what you can do to help the country. And the Andy Burnham is to the left of Labour. The Greens are a long way to on the left side of Labour. And I think it would be really dangerous to let them have the levers of power as part of this coalition of socialist wannabes.
Yeah, I mean, this really, I agree with you entirely. This would be dangerous beyond belief. But the question is, back in 2019, you know, we lived through that era, and you started off the Brexit. Well, you were a Conservative, came to the Brexit Party's name. If we went back to the Conservatives, let's let bygones be bygones. But in 2019, Nigel Farage did stand down his candidates in order to prevent crazy Corbyn becoming the Prime Minister. He said, look, you know, I've got to do this. The stakes are too high. The Conservatives are going to have a free run at this, because otherwise I could be the reason why this madman is now Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Will the Conservatives return that favour? Because you know them far better than I do. And my concern is this, that there is a sort of pride and obstinacy, a pig-headedness amongst sections of the Conservative Party who spent a long time lobbing mud and slinging insults at Nigel Farage. And there's still, I feel, a bit of a leftist flank within the Conservative Party. And the way the wind is blowing, it looks like if someone was going to have to do the decent thing and get out the fight so someone else could win, it would have to be the Conservatives doing that for reform. Do you think they would?
This is a very, very different position. And Nigel did stand down candidates in 2019, but only against sitting Tory MPs, and not against candidates, and actually they needed to win more seats. So it wasn't quite the incredible offer it might have at first looked. Also, it's a very, very different world. The Tories are still on 20%. That is not insignificant. There are areas of the country that are much stronger for Tories than they are for Reform, and there's the reverse. And I think the two parties need to have a sensible conversation about how they can work together to maximise their impact in the areas where they are most successful.
So my question to you is, do you think they would do that? Do you think the Conservatives would do that, though? I mean, look, I'm asking you because you know them better than I do, and you know, neither of us can speak on behalf of Nigel Farage, but, you know, we acknowledge he did something in 2019, and we know that Zia Youssef has sort of intimated that, you know, if it was 11th hour and a deal needed to be struck, then country comes first. My question is, do you think would Kemi Badenoch say, OK, yeah, this is the right thing to do?
There's not going to be a deal, and Nigel has been as vociferously anti-Tory as the Tories have been about being anti-reform, and there's not going to be a deal until there's a deal. But something is going to have to change. This fracturing of our politics means that deals have to come onto the table that we haven't realised we have to undertake yet. But something is going to happen, or there will be, very likely, a hard left coalition after the election, and the country is what will lose. The pride of Kemi Badenoch and of Nigel Farage is a hugely secondary matter to rescuing our country.
I agree. And you know what? I do hope and believe that nobody is that egomaniacal that they would allow the Green Party anywhere near the levers of power. So I do live in hope. Annunziata Rees-Mogg, it's lovely catching up with you, my darling. We should go for a drink soon. OK, right. Let's take a short break now. But I've got an exciting guest because he's coming into the studio. We're kidnapping Colonel Simon Diggins, OBE, Defence and Military Analyst, because he entered the building and Ted was like, listen, Simon's here. Let's get him in. So that's what's happening after the break. We couldn't be in better company. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. He's here, ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Simon Diggins. Thank you for coming. Thank you for allowing yourself to be shanghaied by young Ted there. Always great to have people in the studio with me. Now, what on earth is going on with Britain? Why were we saying to America, you can't use Diego Garcia, you can't use Fairford? Why are our boats parked anywhere but where they need to be?
Yeah, Alex, good afternoon to you. We've got ourselves in a really real mess here. And I think there's two big issues. One is, should we be supporting America in terms of this operation? To which the short answer is, for me, is yes. But even if you were not of that mind, we should still have been dealing with the consequences or potential consequences of what has been a running conflict between the US and Iran, and over the last 8 weeks or so has clearly been building up. You know, the Americans didn't just start attacking on Saturday. They've been building their forces up now over the last period of 2 months, and the consequences of that, it could have been an Iranian preemptive attack against them, or if the Americans attacked and then Iran reacted, we know how the Iranians are going to react. We've seen it twice before in the last 2 years. Every time that the Iran reacts, it fires missiles not just at US forces, but at US bases and also what he perceives as US allies in the region. Utterly predictable the way the Iranians reacted. Yeah. We should have been recognising the consequence and make sure we had the forces in place to deal with the consequence. Again, putting to one side the issue about whether we should actually be sitting alongside the Americans in terms of the offensive operation, but at least deal with the consequence, and we've failed miserably so to do.
And the big question I have is, why? It doesn't make sense to me. I had a guest on yesterday, a former naval officer, who said, look, the Navy told the government to get the assets in place. When American assets were going there, they said, look, instead of, you know, boating off over there to Australia, stop in the Middle East, be prepared. And the government said no. Now, we understand from what's been released that it was potentially Ed Miliband who was agitating about not supporting Trump and not doing anything. But I still don't understand the mindset about this. We've now got Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, France, all having to go to protect Cyprus. Do you think it was because we don't have the capabilities? Did they go, well, the boats aren't ready? Is it because they worry about reprisals? Why? I mean, we're not inside their heads, obviously, but you might have some better idea than I can seem to muster.
I think there's the mixture of elements, but they've used the excuse of long-term refurbishment and maintenance programmes, but the fact is a fundamental unwillingness to recognise reality. And I think that's because the heart of this government. We've had it in other aspects of defence. talking the talk, have had a strategic defence review last year, talking the talk about we need to increase defence spending, but massively reluctant to do it, because in order to do it, you've got to find the money from somewhere. And we didn't hear it last Tuesday with Rachel Reeves' spring statement. They don't really believe in defence. They don't believe it. And just in the background, just hovering around the background, is this kind of undercurrent of kind of leftist anti-colonial presence. And so Diego Garcia, the Chagos Islands, and of course Cyprus, sovereign base areas in Cyprus, are effectively remnants of what was once a global empire. So there's no sympathy, no understanding for what the requirement is to look and to defend them. And at the end of the day, people like Miliband hate someone like Trump because he comes along and says the wrong things. You know, Trump, drill baby drill. You know, directly against Miliband and his net zero view of the world. And I think there's also, again, it's only hinted in the background. You know, this concern about the electoral politics of doing that. Now, none of that will come to the surface, or they will try not to surface it. But I think there's a reality. My local town, Watford, last week they had a vigil for Ali Khamenei's death. I mean, that's just, you know, what's happened to our country where we're having vigils for a mass murder.
So this is something I've been asking all of my guests who have a better idea about defence and what's going on than I do, which is, look, we know, as you said, Iran has this hunger for attacking Western military bases, and not just Diego Garcia, which you would assume is out of Iran's range. At least that boat off the coast of Sri Lanka is not working anymore. Thank you for that thing being taken out. But if we have IRGC sleeper cells, we've definitely got, you know, regime supporters here, because as you said, vigils in Manchester, the Al-Quds March is going to take place in London, Watford. You know, we know that they've got people planted here. That now Fairford is being activated. And I keep asking this because I genuinely want to know, could Iran press the button of their sleeper cells and say, attack that airbase, start attacking on British soil?
They could cause some disruption because the level of security in those bases may not be what it was.
Right,
we saw
after
Bryce Norton. Now, because it's based in an American base, I suspect the security is rather tighter. But security is not just about the immediate perimeter. It's about what's going on in the local area, who's in the local area, and everything that goes there.
Me, I live in the local area.
Absolutely. So, Alex, we need to look after you. That's the top priority of the whole.
I'll go defend Fairford myself.
Exactly. So we'll go to DEFCON 5 just to look after you. So I think we'll absolutely do that. So no, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And does it? You know, what does it say to America about how reliable we are as an ally? You know, not just whether we're actually physically supporting on the ground, but whether you've got these, as you say, these vigils for a murderer. This regime is disgusting. It hangs rape victims. It blinds women protesters. It murders its own people. It spreads terror around the world. Apparently we're not going to go in and get rid of it. I mean, really?
It's the embodiment of evil.
Values?
It's the embodiment of evil.
Where are our values if we're not going to do something with them?
How do you see this playing out? Because a thing that's not really been spoken about enough, I don't think, and I read analysis yesterday that I just can't shake from my mind, that when there was the Iranian oil embargo of 1973, which precipitated, blackouts, disaster, economics, catastrophe around the globe, and we know we're already in a very precarious situation with energy prices, government borrowing, we're on very thin ice as it is. I read that if the Strait of Hormuz is shut for more than a week, and it's basically day 2 now, it will have exceeded that crisis. It would be epochal, was the word that was used to describe this. How do you see this going? I mean, America's now talking about, we're going to have to try and get vessels through that strait. Is Iran luring them into a trap? Will they have submarines ready to blast American vessels doing that? Are they going to lace the strait with mines? Or is this in hand? Do you think that we can, when I say we, because it's not we, is it? We're not involved. But the US and Israel can get this done and shut down? Because Trump's talking about until September.
Yeah. I think it's going to take a little bit longer than a short period of time. I mean, I think I kind of welcome what appears to be sort of elements of realism from some of the American commentators, and and the government saying this is not going to be this is not a weekend job. This is not sort of a 10-day war. This is going to be longer than that. They do recognise the importance of the Strait of Hormuz, and one of the declared war aims right from the beginning was the destruction of they said the Iranian Navy. It's not just the Iranian Navy. It's also the IRGC's kind of boat element
and the proxies, the
Houthis. and the proxies, but particularly IRGC who are not incapable. They've got these fast patrol boats. They operate in swarms. They can put missiles down and they can put mines down. So eliminating them as a major threat will be there. But even convoys would not be risk-free. I mean, look back at the last experience we really had of convoys, which is the Second World War. The point about convoys is they're safer than single ships. It doesn't mean there is no no risk to them. So I think what we'll have to end up doing is, and this is where government will need to step in and actually say, because the insurance market is just literally out of the window from where we are at the moment, just say, we will cover your war risks. Always a big issue with insurance, why prices go up, because war risks go, whereas we will cover your war risks of sailing through the Gulf. US, you're going to provide the escorts. We'll cover the war risk for shipping going through there, and then we'll get through this. Won't be casualty free, won't be cost free, but we can get through it if we've got the will, because we recognise the importance of what we're doing. And again, there's a precedent for that. Even go back to the Second World War. There was a period of time where the United States supported us in terms of convoy protection, but was not part of the war effort. So even as government's taking this defensive posture, there's still things it can do to ensure that basically, at the end of the day, the good guys win. And that means making sure that the oil pressure that will be on doesn't stop us, or it doesn't come on to Americans and go, no, we've got to stop this because of the economics. So there are still things this government can do if it has the willpower to do so.
I got a little bit of breaking here, which is that Iran has threatened EU member states over their position on the conflict. Countries in the bloc, and I quote, would pay the price sooner or later if they remain silent on the US-Israeli strikes on Iran. That's a foreign ministry spokesman speaking to the Spanish broadcaster TVE. Now, this is the thing about Iran. I mean, it is a theocratic regime. They have an eschatological mindset. For people who don't know what that means, is religious end times.
Absolutely.
If Iran's going down, the nut jobs over in Tehran are like, let the whole world go down with it. And you can see they're trying to drag more and more people in. Azerbaijan now, get involved, you're part of the war now. And so far, what we've seen is these countries clubbing together and going against Iran. China said, we'll go over to Qatar and mediate things. OK, thank you very much. Russia are probably sitting there rubbing their hands together with delight because they can get on with stuff in Ukraine, although they're not getting many drones anymore, one would imagine.
No.
But is there a risk of this turning into what I believe Iran wants it to turn into, which is World War III?
There is that element, but I think that's... I mean, I'd put the argument almost the other way around and say we've actually been involved in World War III with Iran since 1979. Let's be clear. They are opposed utterly to what we regard as Western values. And for our own country, United Kingdom, we are the little Satan. We've always been declared as the little Satan, which is why we've been a target of attacks in the past. It's why they gleefully killed British soldiers in Iraq anytime from 2004 onwards. It was the Mahdi army, inspired and paid, trained and organised by Iran that has done that, and we're always seen as part of that. But what we're getting here is the typical tactic: spread the hate around the world, and it comes from a position of not just the eschatological one about their future, but also belief, and frankly, a belief of contempt towards us. We are a decadent, atheist, immoral Kafirs, and therefore, we tried to frighten them with this kind of comical alley type performance, just like the guy who was the spokesman for the Iraqi regime, who was saying that hell was going to descend on them as the American tanks were driving past his window. Yes, they'll fire at us. Yes, there'll be attacks. But honestly and truly, A, right is on our side. If we stick with it, the force is on our side as well, and we just need to have the willpower to make it so.
What staggers me in all of this is the countries who are saying, get in there, fight the Iranians, they're blooming evil, are the Gulf nations. They're saying, you've got to come, help, fight, get rid of them. It's the blooming West. It's Canada and Australia and the wets over in the EU going, I don't think this is very legal. They shouldn't have done that. It's a craziness. The West are the ones fighting against the West, who should be fighting against the evil regime.
Those who have been most directly exposed to Iran's mischief-making over the last 40-odd years are the ones who are most behind it. They've often been unable to kind of break cover because they're concerned about what Iran's going to do next. They can now break cover and reveal, exactly as you say, exactly what they think about the Iranians. The Iranians have been destabilising their regimes, for the last 40-odd years. They've tried to assert dominance in the Islamic world, and they've done that through violence, through subversion, and through undermining people. And now finally they can come out and go, we've had enough of this. We no longer want you as a destabilising influence. We want you back into your box. The Israelis and the Americans are doing it, and we're with them. These are their neighbours who hate them with a passion, and we're the ones who are standing to one side. And I was reading this morning, the Bahrainis and the Emiratis have asked really serious questions about, is Britain really the ally they see themselves as? We've always been the traditional ally. And in a curious way, because we weren't the Americans, we were actually more popular. They would talk to us because they knew they were talking to the West. They knew that we were talking to the Americans, but we weren't the Americans they were talking to. But we're in real danger of losing that strategic position because of the way in which we performed on this occasion.
And finally, one of the excuses for why we're sort of being lily-livered about getting stuck in is, well, we want to know what their plan is. And I always think Muppet media just they repeat these words as if that's the thing. My view of this, and I don't know if it's the same, is, of course there's a blimmin' plan. Trump's not about to put it on a PDF and WhatsApp it around the world, is he?
No, but sometimes you have to, sometimes you have to start wars because you don't know where they're going. Again, look at the Second World War. We opposed Germany because they'd invaded Poland. We're not being able to do anything about Poland. But the idea of where the war aims were didn't really become clear until 1943. Here's, I think, to my thinking, it really is very clear. Iran was pushing for a nuclear weapon. Not just a nuclear weapon, it was also pushing to obtain hypersonic missiles from the Chinese and up-to-date Russian air defence missiles from there. And it was going to try and put it in a position where it was invulnerable. Now, how far they were along that spectrum of invulnerability, nobody actually really knows. But would you really hang around and wait until they actually explode or they have a successful launch of their very sophisticated and actually quite technically competent ballistic missiles? No. And Trump and the Israelis are going, we don't know where they are, but we know they're heading in that direction. We've got to do it sometime. We've got to go now.
Right. I mean, this is it. Trump 1.0 was doing this by pulling out the JCPOA. So I just think the idea that there isn't a plan in all of this is a ridiculous assertion to make. Simon, it's so good to see you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for coming in. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but what do they think of us on the other side of the Atlantic? I don't think it's good. Well, actually, no, it's not us. Trump loves us. He says as much. But Starmer, he thinks he's a bit of a loser. Going to be catching up with one of my faves, Adam Coleman, columnist for the New York Post, just after this.
The Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, or gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, once upon a time, they all thought he was the Trump whisperer. Do you remember that really cringeworthy press conference in the Oval? Where Starmer sat next to Donald Trump and was basically pouring at him like some sort of geisha, seductively pulling out the invitation to the state banquet. Look what I have here. Well, turns out he ain't flavour of the month anymore. Trump thinks he's an idiot. Let's speak now to Adam Coleman, columnist from the New York Post. Oh, Adam, I'm so sorry. I apologise on behalf of the entire of the United Kingdom to the US president and the people of America that we are led by, I don't know whether he's a traitor or a wimp. What's being said in America about us?
I would lean more towards wimp. But, you know, I think what's been happening lately is there's been a lot of posturing within the country, and there's been a little bit of posturing outside the country as well. Keir Starmer is an example. But none of that surprises me, and I don't think it surprises anyone who's been paying attention. I think the tariff arguments going back and forth between the United States and the UK maybe sour the relationship a little bit. But in general, I mean, this is partly my personal opinion. I think he's a bit of a weak man just in general. And I think there's been a sense of weakness coming from the UK government and actually probably from the EU in general, who are unwilling to go against things that don't make sense and unwilling to do the unpopular thing that is necessary.
I mean, thankfully, we've had a win in the Senate. So with America, well, the Republicans backing Trump on his actions. Where does America stand on this? Is it one of those sort of dividing on party lines of those who support affirmative, assertive action in the Gulf and those who don't?
It's a mixed bag. Actually, this is one of the few issues that is not entirely partisan. I mean, it is partisan because the Democrats just hate Trump by default. But as far as polling goes, it's a bit mixed from the American public. And I think the reason being is we have a sense of reluctancy to war because of what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I'm partly guilty of that as well, taking a stronger anti-war stance, especially years ago. And it's because we were promised, oh, this would be boom, real quick, we'll be in and out. And then next thing you know, we got boots in the ground. And next thing you know, it's 20 years later. And then Biden fumbles, getting troops out of Afghanistan. So we're very reluctant to get into things of this nature. And so it seems, for people who aren't paying attention, it seems out of nowhere, right? So it's not a 9/11 happens, we're looking for who's responsible. Like there's a cause and effect that the American public can see. From a diplomatic standpoint, this is something that appears to have been building up. And then now we're at that point. So I think that's why it's so split. We're just very reluctant to try to get into any wars.
It's interesting that a while ago, people like Nigel Farage and people in the UK were saying to the Americans, you've got to see what Trump's doing about these Chagos Islands. He's going to give them to Mauritius. It's China's ally. That's your air base there. And at one point, Trump's like, nah, it's okay. It's a good deal. It's the best deal he could get. Then all of a sudden he had a thought and went, actually, this is ridiculous. This is a surrender deal. You're turning it into woke island. Now all of a sudden it's come to a head. Everyone knows the word Chagos and Diego Garcia because the UK said, you're not allowed to use it. I mean, thankfully, they've slightly changed their tune on this one. How do you see that progressing? Because I keep saying to my mates in America, you need to subpoena those involved in that deal, drag them in front of Congress and find what on earth has gone on.
You know what? I'll admit here, this is an area that I'm not too strong on. So I don't have like a whole lot of commentary about that particular topic. So I do apologize.
That's all right. It's okay. Like I said, Chagos, it's been a big conversation in the UK, but like I said, I actually sort of precursored the question with Americans weren't aware of what's going on in this regard. Do you think that, it's always a lazy journalistic question, but do you think that this is going to be fairly terminal now for the relationship between Starmer and Trump? Because he's quite a mercurial character.
Probably, but you know what? I've seen Trump do weird things from a politician standpoint where someone goes out of favor and the next thing you know, they're back. Look at Elon Musk.
Right.
Elon Musk was his best friend, and the next moment, Elon Musk is trashing him. And then, 5 minutes later, Elon Musk is back in the White House and everything is good. So, Trump 2.0 seems to be a bit more forgiving. I've talked about this before. He seems to be different. He's still the same, but in small ways, he's a little bit different. I think he seems to be the type of person, he's open to someone becoming better in his grace, and giving them a second chance, maybe than, 10 years ago.
Also, where's JD? I haven't seen him for a while. It's all Rubio right now, and Rubio's quite hawkish. I love a bit of Marco Rubio, can I just say? Thank goodness for him. But a while ago, it was JD Vance at the Munich Security Conference over a year ago, saying Europe needs to get its act together. But this time round, it was Marco Rubio. And my understanding is JD Vance is sort of very non-interventionist. Is he been locked in a cupboard somewhere? Is he all right?
Well, the last thing I saw was from the State of the Union where they were talking about that JD was going to head up going after fraud in the federal government.
Right.
So that's the last I really saw of him and his impact. But just in general, the vice president position is kind of like it's a cheerleader role. Like you have no real power. So it's kind of like you're either waiting for someone to die, which hopefully that person doesn't. And in the meantime, here, why don't you, become the border czar like Kamala? Like they're just giving you stuff to do, but you don't really have any power or say. You just have, you can call the press and get some attention. That's about it.
But is he cheerleading for Trump right now? Because my understanding is he's not really one for foreign wars, has actually been quite vocal against them. But is he doing a good support act right now for the president?
Well, maybe we shouldn't look at it as, is JD not being put forward because he doesn't support it? More so that Marco Rubio does a better job at representing what's going on. Because this is his job. This is his role. And he's doing a great job as far as communicating what is going on, shooting down false information as to what's happening. And everything that they've said that's been going on seems to be pretty accurate as far as the results on the ground. And that's I think the big takeaway for me is that there are no boots on the ground. Anytime you engage in some sort of conflict, there are going to be like a small amount of casualties or some sort of casualties. I believe it was 4 service members or 6 service members who were killed in this entire, in a situation. But we also have friendly fire, so things like this are always going to happen. I do think that as long as we don't have U.S. troops going on the ground in Iran, I think Trump will survive this. And I think the Republican Party will survive this because this will be seen as Republican-led. But the moment we start sending troops on the ground, the longer they're on the ground, the worse it's going to appear.
Now, unsurprisingly, in the United Kingdom, we've got a load of Islamist sympathisers holding vigils for the late Ayatollah. Are you seeing anything like that in America?
Very small amounts, and they're all paid by China. So, it's the same people. We don't like to actually call it what it is, but these are paid protesters. These are organizations that are funded either by the Muslim Brotherhood or they're funded by the CCP, right? And this isn't hyperbolic. These are factual things. There's no reason as to why something happens and they already have the posters ready to go in less than an hour and everyone is mobilized. And it's because this is their job. They are highly funded operations that are happening across the country.
Oh, Adam, it's great catching up with you. Thank you so much for joining us. The brilliant Adam Coleman, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, Ian, have you got your kefir and your candle ready to go join the Al-Quds March on Saturday?
Love a bit of Kumbaya and all that. I'm not sure there'll be much of that being sung over there, but extraordinary. I mean,